Hyperobjects are not just large things. They are realities so vast in temporal and spatial scale that they overwhelm our ability to truly grasp them. Climate change, nuclear waste, plastic pollution, these aren't just problems. They're hyperobjects. They persist across centuries, operate invisibly across continents, and permeate every layer of our lives without us even realizing it. You can't point to a single spot and say, there it is, you breathe it, you live inside it. Hyperobjects. We try to frame them in charts, policies, and conferences, but they elude our perception. Hyperobjects stretch beyond the human scale of understanding, and yet they shape our weather, our politics, even our mental health. You can't see climate change the way you see a hurricane, but it's the hurricane's ghost. You can't hold a decade of radiation from a reactor meltdown, but it lives in the bones of unborn children. Hyperobjects operate like shadows that outlive us, memories written in oceans and air. You realize you're not just standing on Earth, you're entangled in something far bigger, something indifferent, something permanent. The terrifying part? We created many of them. Through centuries of industry, war, and waste, we summon hyperobjects into existence, and now they won't go away. They don't care if you believe in them. They are not waiting for us to catch up. They just are. Thinking about them is like staring into the sun. It's too much, so we look away, but they keep creeping in the temperature, in the floods, in our breath. You don't witness a hyperobject. You realize one has already swallowed you. Myological Nihilism. Myological nihilism is the radical idea that composite objects, like chairs, cats, trees, or even you, don't truly exist. At the most fundamental level, there are only the tiniest building blocks of matter scattered like dust across the universe. What we think of as things are just convenient illusions, mental shortcuts that help our limited brains function in a chaotic world. That table you're leaning on, it's not a table, it's a cloud of atoms loosely interacting, momentarily aligned. Take away the labels, and all you have is particles and patterns. This philosophy isn't just abstract, it shatters the way we relate to the world. You start questioning everything. If a tree isn't really a tree, what does that mean for forests, for homes, for human bodies? If people are just bundles of particles, what becomes of identity, love, responsibility? Suddenly, the self begins to feel like a ghost haunting a machine that was never whole to begin with. But that's the haunting beauty of myological nihilism. It forces us to admit how fragile our reality is. It tells us that our categories are masks we've painted on to a swirling, meaningless abyss of matter. And yet we cling to those masks because without them, everything dissolves. Your favorite mug isn't a thing. It's a comforting lie told by molecules. The phone in your hand is just an agreement between atoms not to fall apart, for now. If composite objects don't exist, then we are all just swirling patterns pretending to be whole. And deep down, maybe we already know. Epistemic injustice. Epistemic injustice is a quiet violence, a theft so subtle it rarely gets named, yet it corrodes lives. It happens when someone is wronged, not for what they don't know, but for who they are while knowing. Imagine telling the truth, living the truth, being the truth, and having your voice dismissed because of your accent, your gender, your skin, your job, your trauma. You speak, and the room goes silent, not in respect, but in disbelief. That's epistemic injustice. It comes in two piercing forms. First, testimonial injustice, when your knowledge is discounted because of prejudice. You're too emotional, too young, not educated enough, biased, angry. You say, "This happened to me." They say, "Are you sure?" Second, hermeneutical injustice, when you don't even have the words to name your experience, because society never gave you the tools. You feel it, but you can't explain it. You suffer, but the language isn't there to validate it, and so your truth dies in your throat. These injustices leave no visible scars, but they erode confidence, silence stories, and distort history. Entire communities have been told they are unreliable narrators of their own lives. Survivors, laborers, people of color, the poor, rendered invisible not by fact, but by doubt. Their truth is buried beneath centuries of disbelief. What makes epistemic injustice so insidious is that it masquerades as neutrality, as reason, as objectivity. But really, it's a refusal to listen, a refusal to believe. It's not just about who speaks, it's about who gets to be heard and who gets to be right. Mott and Bailey Doctrine. The Mott and Bailey Doctrine is intellectual sleight of hand. It's the art of retreating to safety when challenged, then advancing again when no one's looking. Picture a medieval castle. The Mott is a small, well-fortified tower, easy to defend but not where people want to live. The Bailey is the wide, open, desirable land, rich, expansive, but vulnerable. In argument, the Mott is a bland, safe claim no one can reasonably oppose. The Bailey is the bold, controversial belief someone actually wants to push. And the trick? Pretend they're the same thing. A person makes a provocative claim, maybe something incendiary, harmful, or ideological. You push back. Suddenly they retreat. Oh no, all I meant was this simple, harmless idea. You back off, because who could argue with that? But as soon as the scrutiny fades, they return to the Bailey, the belief they really meant to spread, cloaked in the legitimacy of the Mott. It's manipulation masked as logic. It happens in politics, activism, media, academia, anywhere words have power. I'm just saying we should protect freedom of speech, someone insists, but what they're really doing is justifying hate. We all want equality, they nod, while defending systems that enforce hierarchy. The Mott wins your trust. The Bailey slips past your guard. This doctrine is maddening because it preys on your reasonableness. It uses your empathy against you. And when done skillfully, it makes you question your own judgment, makes you wonder if you misunderstood, overreacted, missed the point. But you didn't. You saw the Bailey. Don't let them drag you into the tower. Antinatalism. Antinatalism is a philosophy that punches through the most sacred illusion that bringing a child into the world is always good. It dares to whisper a chilling question: what if giving life is not a gift, but a harm? At its heart, antinatalism argues that procreation is morally wrong, not because life is always terrible, but because suffering is guaranteed. To create life is to create the certainty of pain. And doing so without consent is, at best, a gamble. At worst, it's a crime masked as love. No one asks to be born, yet with birth comes illness, heartbreak, loss, anxiety, fear, decay, and death. Even the happiest life ends in ruin. Antinatalists like David Benatar argue that non-existence spares us these inevitabilities. They frame it not as pessimism, but as compassion, radical empathy for the unborn, who will never scream in pain, never fear death, never weep for someone they love. It isn't just about pain, it's about imposition. Every parent, knowingly or not, rolls the cosmic dice with someone else's body, someone else's mind. You give them moments of joy, yes, but you also give them cancer, war, betrayal, and despair. Antinatalism insists no amount of happiness can justify pain that was never chosen. This view shatters the idol of parenthood. It cuts deep because it asks, are we creating children for them or for us? For legacy, for love, for fear of being alone? It forces us to confront a truth we bury under lullabies and nursery walls, that sometimes the most compassionate act is not to give life, but to withhold it. Conceptual Engineering. Conceptual engineering is philosophy with a hammer. It's the radical idea that our concepts, truth, gender, freedom, intelligence, even person, aren't sacred artifacts. They're tools, and when tools break, you don't worship them. You fix them, you redesign them, or you throw them away. This isn't about nitpicking definitions. It's about rewriting the cognitive blueprints that shape reality itself. Every day, we use concepts to navigate the world, but what if the map is wrong? What if race was drawn by colonizers? What if rationality favors one kind of mind? What if justice was built to protect the powerful, not the vulnerable? Conceptual engineering dares to ask, what if the problem isn't how we argue, but the words we argue with? We inherit language soaked in history, bias, assumption, and then we call it common sense. This idea is disruptive. It says that meanings aren't fixed, they evolve. They're forged in debate, in protest, in pain. When we say woman, are we invoking biology, identity, experience, oppression? When we say freedom, do we mean absence of constraint or presence of opportunity? Conceptual engineers step into that fog and ask, what do we want this word to do for us? Then they rebuild it. Sometimes this looks like activism, sometimes it looks like academia, sometimes it looks like war, because changing a concept means changing who gets seen, who gets heard, and who gets erased. It's dangerous work, but liberating, because once you realize concepts are inventions, you can start inventing better ones that don't just reflect the world, but help remake it. The problem of other minds. The problem of other minds is a quiet horror hiding in plain sight, an unsettling riddle you live with every day but rarely stop to face. How do you know that anyone else around you is truly conscious? You see faces, hear words, watch gestures, but you don't feel what they feel. You never will. For all you know, the world could be filled with perfectly functioning puppets, speaking, laughing, crying, yet hollow inside. Only you know your thoughts. Only you can be sure you're real. This isn't some stoner musing or sci-fi fantasy. It's a real, relentless philosophical challenge. You observe behavior, but behavior isn't proof of awareness. A robot could say, I'm sad, mimic pain, even beg for mercy. And how would you know it doesn't mean it? Now turn that question back on your partner, your parents, your child, the people you love most. You say, I understand you, but do you? Or are you just projecting your own mind into a black box you'll never open? We're trapped in ourselves, isolated observers staring out through the windows of our skulls, desperate to believe someone's staring back. This haunting uncertainty is the reason we cling to connection, chase empathy, crave love. It's why betrayal cuts so deep, because we assume the other person felt, because we needed them to be real. The terrifying possibility is not that we're alone in the universe. It's that we're surrounded by silence disguised as sound, mass mistaken for minds. And the worst part, you can never know for sure. Moral particularism. Moral particularism is the rebellion against rules. It says there are no moral formulas, no tidy principles that tell you what's right every time. No universal code that says lying is always wrong, kindness is always good, or stealing is always bad. Instead, particularism whispers something deeply human and deeply unsettling. Context is everything. It challenges the idea that ethics is like math, with clean, repeatable answers. It says moral life isn't a science, it's art, a living, breathing response to the messiness of real life. A lie told to protect a child isn't the same as a lie told to exploit someone. A slap in anger isn't the same as a slap in defense. A promise made in comfort isn't the same when kept in suffering. Particularism says the moral weight of an action doesn't live in the action, it lives in the situation. This idea can feel like chaos. If there are no fixed rules, how do we know what's right? But maybe that's the point. Maybe life is too complex, too fluid, too sacred to be reduced to commandments and checklists. Moral particularism demands attention, empathy, discernment. It asks us to look, really look, at the people involved, the stakes, the emotions, the history. It demands responsibility, not to the rule book, but to the moment. It's a lonely position because it removes the crutch of certainty, but it's honest because when you stand at the crossroads of love and betrayal, of duty and pain, you know it. Principles don't always fit, and sometimes the right thing has no name, only a feeling that you must carry alone. Quine's Indeterminacy of Translation. Quine's Indeterminacy of Translation is a philosophical earthquake, a quiet detonation that leaves the foundations of language and meaning fractured beyond repair. At its core, it declares something deeply unsettling. There is no single objective way to pin down meaning between radically different languages, not because we lack data, but because meaning itself is a shifting mirage. Even with perfect observation, even with complete context, the words of another culture might never truly be translated. Not fully, not truthfully. Imagine a linguist encountering an unknown tribe. A native shouts, "Gavagai," as a rabbit scurries by. The linguist assumes it means rabbit, but what if it means furry thing, rabbit stage, or food source running? The behavior fits all of these meanings, and none can be proven wrong. Even when the linguist asks for clarification, the answers themselves require interpretation through an already fragile lens. Every attempt to translate rests on assumptions that dissolve under scrutiny. This doesn't just challenge dictionaries. It threatens the very idea that words mean anything fixed. If no interpretation is uniquely correct, then meaning is never a discovery. It's an invention, a guess dressed up as certainty. Language becomes less a mirror of the world and more a desperate attempt to project coherence onto chaos. You start to question everything, every book, every prayer, every "I love you" whispered in the dark. What if we've never truly understood anyone ever? What if we've only ever translated them into ourselves? And if meaning is this unstable, then how do we know we're even speaking the same reality at all? Modal Realism. Modal realism is the mind-bending idea that every possible world you can imagine, every what if, every almost, every never was, is as real as the world you're living in right now. Not metaphorically, not hypothetically, literally. According to philosopher David Lewis, when you imagine a world where you became a musician instead of an accountant, or where dinosaurs still roam the earth, or where humanity never existed, those worlds exist, somewhere, just not here. This isn't science fiction, it's metaphysics at its most radical. In modal realism, possibility isn't just a way of speaking, it's a gateway to infinity. Every decision you didn't make, every life you didn't live, every outcome history didn't choose, each spins off into a fully realized world, just as solid and vivid and true as this one. You are just one version of yourself, living one strand of a limitless cosmic braid. It's dizzying. It means there are worlds where you died young, and worlds where you never die, worlds where you are a villain, a hero, a stranger, a god. It erases the illusion of uniqueness and opens the terrifying thought, you are not the only you. There are infinite yous doing all the things you didn't. Modal realism isn't comforting. It fractures reality. It makes your regrets sting sharper because somewhere they didn't happen. It makes your victories feel hollow because somewhere you lost. And yet it's awe-inspiring. It says possibility is not just potential, it's reality. All of it, everywhere, forever. A multiverse not of theory, but of truth. Epistemic humility. Epistemic humility is not weakness. It's not ignorance. It's the raw, quiet strength of admitting, I don't know, I may never know. It's the moment when arrogance crumbles under the weight of the unknown, when certainty gives way to awe. In a world drowning in opinions, hot takes, and false confidence, epistemic humility is a whisper that echoes louder than a scream. It's the courage to kneel before the mystery of existence and say, this might be bigger than me. It starts as a crack in the armor. Maybe you're faced with a question too vast. What happens after death? What is consciousness? Why does anything exist at all? You reach for answers, and for a moment you almost grasp one, but then it slips, and in that slipping, something holy happens. You stop pretending. You realize that human reason is powerful, yes, but limited. That language can describe atoms and galaxies, but not the ache in your soul at 3 a.m., that your beliefs, no matter how polished, are shadows cast on a cave wall. Epistemic humility isn't apathy. It's not giving up. It's standing at the edge of the cliff, peering into the abyss, and still daring to wonder. It's listening more than you speak, doubting without despairing, thinking without needing to conquer. It's what keeps science honest, faith sincere, philosophy alive. In a world where people kill for what they know, epistemic humility asks a deeper question. What if truth isn't something we own, but something we approach, trembling with open hands? The Ship of Theseus. The Ship of Theseus is an ancient thought experiment that asks a deceptively simple question. If every single part of a ship is replaced, piece by piece, is it still the same ship? At first, it feels like a riddle about wood and nails, but then it unravels everything you think you know about identity, memory, and the self. Imagine a ship, wooden, beautiful, storied. As time wears it down, planks are replaced, the sails are swapped, even the anchor is new. Decades later, not a single original part remains, but people still call it Theseus's ship. They believe it holds the same legacy, the same meaning. But does it? Now imagine this. All the old parts that were removed are stored and reassembled into another ship. So now, which one is the true ship of Theseus? The one that's been repaired over time, or the one made from its original body? It sounds like a trick, but it cuts into the core of what we are, because you are a ship of Theseus. Every cell in your body replaces itself. Your memories change. Your beliefs evolve. The person you were at 5 is not the person you are now, and yet you still say, "This is me." So who are you? Are you your parts, your history, your continuity, or just a story held together by time and hope? The Ship of Theseus isn't just a puzzle, it's a mirror. And when you look into it, the question shifts from, is it still the same ship, to something far more haunting. Have I ever truly stayed the same? Non-overlapping Magisteria. Non-overlapping Magisteria is the fragile truce drawn between two titans, science and religion, each claiming its own kingdom, each warned not to trespass. Coined by Stephen Jay Gould, the idea proposes that science and religion occupy separate domains of teaching authority. Science covers the empirical, what is, while religion addresses meaning, morality, and what ought to be. They are magisteria, realms of knowing that do not conflict because they do not intersect. It sounds like peace, but underneath this delicate boundary lies tension, longing, and a quiet desperation to make sense of a fragmented world. Science dissects the cosmos with ruthless precision. It shows us what stars are made of, how cells divide, how brains light up with emotion, but it remains silent when asked, why does beauty hurt? Why do we suffer? What does love mean when the neurons stop firing? Religion, on the other hand, speaks in myth and metaphor, offering purpose, comfort, and transcendence. But it cannot split atoms. It cannot cure disease. Non-overlapping Magisteria promises that we can have both, rigor and reverence, facts and faith, without war. But this peace comes at a cost. What happens when religion makes claims about the age of the earth? When science weighs in on free will, consciousness, or the origins of morality, the borders blur, the magisteria bleed. Still, the idea offers a way to live in a divided world without tearing ourselves apart. It tells us, maybe it's okay that some questions burn without answers. Maybe it's okay to kneel in a cathedral and a laboratory and know that both are sacred in different ways. Moral luck. Moral luck is the cruel twist in ethics that says, sometimes what kind of person you are depends not on your choices, but on your circumstances. Two people make the same decision with the same intent, the same character, the same care, but one ends in disaster, the other in success, and we judge them differently, not for what they tried to do, but for what happened after. A drunk driver gets home safely one night. Another swerves and kills a pedestrian. Same crime, same negligence, but one lives as a father, a neighbor, a man who made a mistake. The other becomes a criminal, a symbol of tragedy. Their lives diverge forever, not because of who they were, but because of what luck handed them. This is moral luck. It shakes the ground beneath ideas like justice, responsibility, virtue. If so much of what we're judged for depends on timing, weather, accidents, fate, what happens to blame, to praise? You try to be kind, but kindness backfires. You try to help, but someone gets hurt. And suddenly, your morality becomes a coin toss. It gets darker. You don't choose your genetics, your parents, your trauma, your culture, your instincts, and yet you're still judged, as if you authored your soul from scratch. Some people are born lucky enough to be good, others not so much. Moral luck doesn't let you look away. It forces you to see how thin the line is between hero and villain, between innocence and guilt. Sometimes the only difference is what the world did back. Phenomenal conservatism. Phenomenal conservatism is a soft-spoken revolution in how we trust our minds. It says this: if something seems true to you, really, vividly, undeniably seems true, then you have a reason to believe it, unless you have good reason not to. That's it. No proof, no deduction, no experiment required, just the raw force of seeming, of inner experience. You look out the window and it seems sunny, then, unless you've got evidence you're hallucinating, you're justified in believing it's sunny. You feel certain someone's watching you in a dark alley. That feeling counts. It sounds dangerously simple, even naive, but that's what makes it powerful. In a world where doubt is fashionable and truth feels like quicksand, phenomenal conservatism insists that appearances aren't worthless. They're the starting point. Before you can prove, you must perceive. Before logic, there is light. And if we can't trust how things seem, what can we trust? But this idea walks a razor's edge. What if your seeming leads you astray? What if your mind lies? What if it's been conditioned by trauma, bias, or fantasy? The answer lies in responsibility. Seeming gives you permission to believe, but not a license to ignore contradiction. Your feelings, your perceptions, they matter. They just aren't final. Phenomenal conservatism whispers what you already know in your bones. When something strikes you as real, it matters. That first impression, that gut feeling, that flash of recognition, it's not nonsense. It's the moment before knowledge, the ember before fire, and sometimes it's all we have. Weak paternalism. Weak paternalism is the delicate art of stepping in, not to control someone's life, but to protect them when they can't protect themselves. It's not about playing God, it's about catching someone before they fall off a cliff they don't see. When a person is drunk, delusional, deeply misinformed, or temporarily unable to understand the consequences of their actions, weak paternalism allows intervention, not out of superiority, but out of mercy. It's the doctor restraining a patient mid-delirium who's about to pull out their IV. It's the friend grabbing your car keys when you're too high to think straight. It's society saying, not until you're sober, not until you're aware, not until you truly understand what you're doing. It's the moment when autonomy, sacred as it is, takes a back seat to survival. But weak paternalism walks a razor's edge, because the question always lingers. Who decides when someone can't decide? At what point does compassion become control? It's a haunted space where trust battles responsibility and freedom flirts with harm. We want to believe people should always be free to choose, but what if someone's choice is based on lies, on confusion, on trauma they haven't named yet? What if they're walking into fire, thinking it's sunlight? Weak paternalism isn't comfortable. It's the moment you step between someone and their own will, not to override it forever, but to pause it long enough for clarity to return. It's not a rescue, it's a breath, a waiting room between chaos and choice. Quietism. Quietism isn't loud. It doesn't argue. It doesn't rage against contradiction or march through logic like a soldier on a mission. It sits, it listens, and then it asks, what if this problem isn't real? What if it only feels real because we've said it wrong? Quietism is the radical belief that many of philosophy's deepest, most agonizing puzzles about truth, self, free will, even existence, aren't questions to be answered, but illusions born from language gone astray. To the quietist, the mind can tie itself in knots trying to solve what never needed solving. When we ask, what is the self? Or, does the external world exist? We're often victims of our own words, seduced by abstractions that feel profound, but rest on grammatical confusion. Quietism doesn't offer theories. It offers release. It says, look again. Maybe your pain isn't metaphysical, it's linguistic. Maybe you've mistaken shadows for substance. Inspired by Wittgenstein, Quietism doesn't try to build philosophical castles. It clears the rubble. It sees much of philosophy not as a way forward, but as a way out of anxiety, out of circular reasoning, out of the need to have an answer at all. It's a kind of intellectual surrender, but not from weakness, from clarity. It's frustrating, even infuriating, because it doesn't scratch the itch. It tells you the itch was a phantom all along. But in the silence that follows, there's a strange comfort. Maybe peace doesn't come from solving the riddle. Maybe it comes from realizing there never was one. The paradox of hedonism. The paradox of hedonism is a cruel twist in the pursuit of happiness. The more you chase pleasure for its own sake, the more it slips through your fingers. It's the drug that dulls with every hit, the perfect vacation that leaves you emptier when it ends, the laughter that feels hollow when forced. At its core, this paradox reveals a brutal irony. Happiness is most elusive when it's hunted. You set out to feel good. You craft a life of comfort, excitement, indulgence. But slowly, your joy begins to feel mechanical. Meals don't taste the same. Sex feels like a routine. Achievements don't satisfy. You look around and realize you've been circling pleasure like a flame, and now you're burned out. Because pleasure doesn't want to be owned. It arrives when you're not watching. It lingers in moments you didn't manufacture. Deep work, love given without expectation, pain survived and transformed. The paradox whispers that the richest joy often comes from forgetting about joy entirely. You lose yourself in creating, helping, connecting, and suddenly you feel again. It's like happiness sneaks in through the back door while your ego is busy searching the front. The harder you grip, the more it retreats. The more you let go, the more it shows up, quietly, like sunlight on your skin. This truth is hard, especially in a world selling constant pleasure as the goal. But maybe happiness isn't something you seize. Maybe it's what happens when you stop trying to fill the silence and finally listen to it. Existential risk. Existential risk is the specter that haunts humanity's future, the silent threat, not of suffering, but of erasure. It is the risk of everything ending, not just your life or a nation or an era, but of all human life forever. No memories left behind, no one to tell the story, just silence, cold, permanent silence. We're used to thinking in personal scales, illness, war, tragedy, but existential risk operates on a scale so vast it feels unreal. Artificial intelligence that outpaces our control, engineered pandemics that leap borders, runaway climate collapse, nuclear firestorms, nanotechnology spiraling beyond intent. These are not science fiction. They are possibilities hanging just above the surface of now. The horror isn't just death, it's potential lost. Imagine the novels never written, the breakthroughs never born, the love never felt because the future was stolen before it arrived. Humanity is young. If we survive, We might have millions of years ahead, millions of years of learning, art, beauty, and joy. But one mistake, one flash, one chain reaction could end that timeline in an instant. And the most terrifying part? Most people don't think about it. We argue over traffic and timelines while extinction creeps in the background, unnoticed. We elect leaders who won't be alive when the consequences strike. We build tools more powerful than our wisdom can handle. Existential risk is not about paranoia. It's about love. Love for humanity, for the unborn, for what we could become. It's the sobering realization that protecting the future isn't optional. It's our moral duty, because once the light goes out, it will never come back. The problem of induction. The problem of induction is the quiet terror hiding behind every confident prediction. It asks, why do you believe the sun will rise tomorrow? Because it always has? That's not logic. It's habit. And this habit, however comforting, has no rational foundation. David Hume shattered centuries of certainty by pointing out the obvious. Just because something has happened repeatedly doesn't guarantee it will happen again. There's no logical necessity tying the past to the future. It's just an assumption, and one we can't prove. You flip a light switch and expect illumination. You trust the ground beneath your feet, the air in your lungs, the people you love. But what if the rules change? What if the fabric of reality shifts tomorrow in a way that makes your experience irrelevant? There's nothing in logic that forbids it, and that's the haunting part. We build our lives on a foundation we can't justify. Every scientific law, every memory, every plan assumes that the future will mirror the past. But it's just that, an assumption. This realization doesn't just unsettle science, it shakes your faith in ordinary life. You begin to see how fragile confidence is, how easily the mind slips into trust because the alternative is paralysis. The problem of induction doesn't scream, it whispers, it plants doubt in the machinery of reason. It reminds you that certainty is a kind of fiction, a necessary one maybe, but fiction nonetheless. And once you've heard that whisper, you can't unhear it. You move forward anyway, but with a new awareness. The future owes you nothing, not even its resemblance. The Gettier Problem. The Gettier Problem is a quiet detonation in the heart of epistemology, a single philosophical riddle that shattered one of the oldest assumptions about knowledge. For centuries, thinkers believed that to know something, you needed three things. It had to be true, you had to believe it, and you had to have good reason, justified true belief. But then, in 1963, Edmund Gettier dropped a 2-page bombshell that proved this wasn't enough. You could have all three and still be wrong in the right way. Imagine this. You look at a clock and it says 2 o'clock. You believe it's 2 o'clock, and it is 2 o'clock, but the clock is broken. It's been stuck at 2 o'clock for days. You were right, but only by accident. Was that really knowledge? No. It was a lucky hit, a glitch in the system. Gettier cases are these moments, tiny traps where all the ingredients of knowledge seem present, but something invisible warps the truth. They show us how fragile knowing is, how easily it can be faked by chance, by coincidence, by just one false step in a chain of reasoning. They expose a deep vulnerability in the human mind. We can feel certain, be justified, and still be wrong. The Gettier Problem doesn't just question how we know, it shakes our trust in what we think we know. Every confident conclusion, every belief you've defended with evidence, now trembles under the weight of, what if I just got lucky? And that question, once asked, never leaves. New Mysterianism. New Mysterianism is not defeat, it's defiance in the face of a mystery too vast for the human mind. It's the unsettling, humbling belief that no matter how far neuroscience advances, no matter how precise our models become, we may never solve the hard problem of consciousness, not because we're not trying hard enough, but because we're simply not built to. The hard problem asks, why does experience exist at all? Why doesn't the brain just process data like a computer, silent, dark, mechanical? Why does it feel like something to be you, to taste strawberries, to miss someone, to hear music and ache? These aren't computations. They're qualia, raw, subjective experiences that science can describe but never truly explain. New Mysterians, like philosopher Colin McGinn, suggest that our brains may be cognitively closed to the answer. Like dogs trying to understand calculus, we may be staring directly at the truth, yet fundamentally unable to grasp it. The machinery that creates consciousness may be the same machinery that blocks us from understanding it. And that possibility is terrifying. We've mapped galaxies, split atoms, decoded genomes, yet we can't explain why red feels red, why love hurts, why a simple song can make us weep. New Mysterianism dares to say, maybe we are mysteries to ourselves forever, that the most intimate part of being human, our inner world, will remain locked behind a door we can't open, no matter how hard we try. It doesn't mean we stop looking, but it does mean we search with reverence, and with the ache of knowing the answer might always be just out of reach. Moral fictionalism. Moral fictionalism is a beautiful, terrifying lie we tell ourselves, a theory that says morality isn't real in any objective sense, but we should pretend it is anyway. It suggests that when we say murder is wrong or kindness is good, we're not reporting facts about the universe. We're acting out a story, playing a necessary role in a fiction we've agreed to believe, because without it, everything collapses. To the moral fictionalist, moral language is a tool, not a truth. It organizes society, guides behavior, binds communities. It gives us heroes and villains, justice and redemption. But it's all scaffolding, not stone. Deep down, there are no cosmic commandments, no universal should, just molecules, instincts, and stories we've dressed in sacred robes. We speak in moral terms not because they're real, but because pretending they are helps us survive. This idea is electrifying and devastating. It explains why morality feels powerful, yet varies wildly between cultures. It shows how even atheists cling to moral language long after the gods have died. It reveals how we build laws, fight wars, love strangers, all on a foundation of shared illusion. But it also leaves us exposed. If morality is a fiction, what stops someone from tearing it down, from saying, none of this matters, and acting accordingly? Moral fictionalism doesn't give you easy answers. It gives you responsibility to keep telling the story, to live as if it's real, even when you suspect it's not, because maybe the greatest moral act is to protect the lie that holds us together. De dicto versus de re. De dicto versus de re is a razor-thin line in language that slices open the structure of belief and reveals just how fragile our understanding of others truly is. At first glance, it's a subtle distinction, but within it lies a deep philosophical tension. What do we really mean when we say someone believes something? Are we talking about the words they'd agree to, or about what they believe about a thing, even if they don't recognize it? De dicto means of the saying. It's belief tied to a specific description or phrasing. If Anna says, I believe that the masked man robbed the bank, she's expressing a de dicto belief. De re means of the thing, a belief about a particular object or person, regardless of how it's described. Suppose Anna believes the masked man robbed the bank, but she doesn't know that the masked man is actually her own brother. She believes de dicto that the masked man did it, but she does not believe de re that her brother did, even though they are the same person. This tiny sliver of grammar reveals how dangerously easy it is to misunderstand others. What you think someone believes might depend on the labels involved, not the reality beneath them. It means beliefs can be true in one form and false in another. It means that love, guilt, trust, even hatred can be built on misrecognition. The human mind lives in symbols. but the world is made of things, and this quiet gap between what we say and what we mean might be the very space where heartbreak and understanding begin. The principle of charity. The principle of charity is the radical act of choosing understanding over ego. It asks you, before you refute, before you mock, before you dismiss, to pause, to ask, what's the best version of what this person is trying to say? Not the dumbest, not the clumsiest, not the easiest to tear apart, but the strongest. It's a philosophy of generosity, not just of thought, but of spirit. In a world wired for outrage, where conversation has decayed into combat, the principle of charity feels almost rebellious. It's the refusal to caricature your opponent. It's the courage to look for truth even in the mouths of those you disagree with, especially when you'd rather not. It's what turns debate into dialogue and argument into growth. Practicing it is hard. It requires humility. You have to set aside the thrill of the gotcha, the comfort of superiority, the cheap applause of winning. You have to ask yourself, what if I've misunderstood? What if their idea, clumsily said, has a point? It's not about agreeing, it's about listening with integrity. This principle changes everything. In politics, it softens extremism. In relationships, it heals resentment. In academia, it sharpens minds. But most of all, it changes you, because when you interpret others charitably, you begin to think more clearly yourself. You start building bridges instead of burning them. And in a world starving for real conversation, the principle of charity isn't just an intellectual tool. It's an act of hope, a refusal to let noise drown out meaning. The veil of ignorance. The veil of ignorance is not blindness. It's the most powerful act of moral imagination. It asks you to strip away everything you know about yourself, your gender, race, wealth, religion, talents, nationality. Imagine you know nothing of where you'll land in the world, only that you will be born into it. Now, behind this veil, you're asked to design the rules of society. How would you structure justice, rights, opportunity, power, not knowing whether you'll be born rich or poor, free or oppressed, healthy or disabled? This idea, born from philosopher John Rawls, pierces straight to the core of fairness. Because once you don't know who you'll be, selfishness shatters. You stop designing systems to protect your privilege, your comfort, your side. Instead, you start thinking like a human, not a banker, not a prisoner, not a man, not a refugee, just a being among others, desperate to avoid suffering, aching for dignity. It's a simple mental trick and a devastating moral mirror. When we remove our knowledge of our status, we see how unfair the game really is. Suddenly, laws that seemed reasonable look cruel. Inequality that felt natural now feels monstrous. You begin to understand that justice isn't about defending what is. It's about protecting what could be for anyone. And here's the brutal truth. Most people refuse to wear the veil because imagining you could be powerless makes the powerful squirm. But the veil is how we see clearly. Only when we forget who we are can we truly remember what we owe each other. The paradox of tolerance. The paradox of tolerance is a warning disguised as wisdom, a haunting realization that if we tolerate everything, we may end up with nothing left to tolerate. First described by philosopher Karl Popper, it asks, what happens when a tolerant society gives space to the intolerant? The answer is chilling. If intolerance is allowed to grow unchecked in the name of freedom, it will eventually destroy the very tolerance that gave it room to breathe. It begins quietly, a voice that mocks, a movement that excludes, an ideology that dehumanizes. At first, the tolerant shrug. Everyone has a right to speak, they say, and they mean it. But intolerance does not play by those rules. It doesn't want a seat at the table. It wants to flip the table, silence dissent, and rewrite the rules in its own image. And if you let it grow, it will take that freedom and use it as a weapon against women, against minorities, against truth itself. This paradox is painful
because it means drawing lines in a place we hoped had no boundaries. It means saying no in the face of hate, even when it wears the costume of free speech. It forces us to admit that tolerance isn't passive. It's a fierce and fragile act. To protect it, we must sometimes resist those who would destroy it, even as they scream that we're the oppressors. The paradox of tolerance isn't a contradiction. It's a call to vigilance, a reminder that the garden of open society must sometimes build walls, not to shut people out, but to keep the darkness from devouring the light. Semantic externalism. Semantic externalism is the unsettling idea that the meanings in your mind, the concepts, the words, the thoughts you believe are yours, aren't entirely inside your head. They reach outward, tethered to the world around you in ways you don't control. You may think your thoughts are private, sealed behind your eyes, but what if even the meaning of what you're thinking depends on things outside your mind? Imagine two people, physically identical, mentally identical. One lives on Earth, where water refers to H2O. The other lives on a distant planet called Twin Earth, where the liquid that looks, tastes, and feels like water is a completely different chemical, XYZ. Both think that's water, but according to semantic externalism, the content of their thoughts is not the same. Why? Because their environments are different. Meaning, it turns out, isn't just a function of brain chemistry, it's a function of context. This challenges everything we believe about autonomy, language, even identity. Your words don't just mean what you intend, they mean what the world allows them to mean. When you say tree, that word is shaped by centuries of use, by your climate, by what others around you take tree to be. You don't just carry meaning, you borrow it. And it goes deeper. If your mind is shaped by your environment, then changing the world changes you. You're not a closed system, you're porous. The boundaries between mind and world blur, and suddenly your very thoughts become landscapes, landscapes you never fully chose, but are somehow still your own. Negative utilitarianism. Negative utilitarianism is utilitarianism with the mask torn off, the raw, trembling version that stares straight into the abyss of human pain and asks, what if our moral priority isn't making people happy, but making them hurt less? Unlike classic utilitarianism, which seeks to maximize happiness, negative utilitarianism flips the equation. It says that reducing suffering is more urgent, more sacred, more morally serious than increasing joy. It starts from a brutal truth. Happiness is nice, but pain demands. A person without pleasure can still survive, but a person in agony, physical, emotional, existential, cannot escape it. It claws at the mind. It consumes. It reduces life to survival, then to something worse. And if morality is about care, then surely our greatest duty is to ease that agony, not to chase a vague balance of pleasures. Negative utilitarianism whispers in the hospitals, in the war zones, in the minds of the deeply depressed. It knows that one scream weighs more than 1,000 smiles, that pleasure is optional, but suffering insists, and in its most extreme form, it leads to unsettling places. The idea that if suffering outweighs happiness, then the end of consciousness itself might be morally preferable. For some, this feels like compassion. For others, nihilism in disguise. But at its heart, negative utilitarianism is not about despair. It's about urgency. It demands that we treat suffering not as background noise, but as a moral emergency. It asks us to stop chasing utopia and start pulling people out of hell, because before we build heaven, we must first stop the bleeding. The experience machine. The experience machine is a beautiful lie wrapped in wires, a thought experiment that asks the question most people avoid. What do you really want, happiness or truth? Imagine this. Scientists have built a machine that can simulate perfect experiences. You plug in, and for the rest of your life, you'll feel nothing but ecstasy, success, love, and joy. Every moment will feel real. You'll never know it's fake. You'll never wake up.
but none of it is actually happening. It's all illusion. Would you plug in? At first, the temptation is overwhelming. Why suffer? Why feel heartbreak, fear, boredom, loneliness, when you could feel infinite pleasure instead? But then something deeper stirs. You hesitate, because even if the world is hard, even if love is painful and dreams fail, at least it's real. And realness, raw, imperfect, heartbreaking realness, matters. You want your triumphs to mean something. You want your relationships to be with people who exist, not flickers in a digital fantasy. You want to do, not just feel like you did. The experience machine forces us to confront what kind of creatures we are. If pleasure were the only goal, we'd plug in. But most people don't, because deep down, we don't just want to feel alive. We want to be alive, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts. And in that choice, to walk through a broken world rather than escape into a perfect illusion, we reveal something sacred about ourselves. That meaning is born not from bliss, but from reality, from pain that is ours, and joy that we earn. Foucault's power knowledge. Foucault's concept of power knowledge is a revelation that hits like a slow, creeping fog, the unsettling idea that knowledge is never pure, never neutral, never detached from power. It tells us that what we know is shaped not just by evidence, but by who gets to speak, who gets to be heard, and who gets to decide what counts as truth. Knowledge doesn't merely reflect reality, it helps create it. And power doesn't just enforce rules, it writes the script of what we believe. Think of prisons, schools, hospitals. These institutions don't just manage bodies, they shape minds. They define what is normal, what is mad, what is deviant, what is healthy. Power doesn't just lock you up, it names you, diagnoses you, educates you, and each label you wear, criminal, student, patient, citizen, is a form of knowledge bound to authority. Foucault saw that knowledge isn't liberating by default. It can be a weapon, a cage, a mirror built by someone else. Even science, our proudest form of truth, is not immune. Who funds the research? Who controls the language? Whose questions get asked and whose truths are ignored? Foucault didn't say all knowledge is false. He said it's strategic. And when power shifts, the truth often shifts with it. This idea doesn't destroy truth. It demands we interrogate it. It forces us to ask, whose truth? Built by whom? For what purpose? Because in Foucault's world, power doesn't just enforce, it informs. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. Every truth you hold might just be someone else's control, wrapped in the calm voice of reason. Zeno's paradoxes. Zeno's paradoxes are ancient traps for the modern mind, simple, elegant riddles that make reality itself stutter. They were crafted over 2,000 years ago, but they still echo like thunder in the quietest corners of philosophy, and they all ask one chilling question: what if motion, what if movement isn't real at all? Take the most famous, Achilles and the tortoise. Achilles, swift as a god, races a slow-moving tortoise. He gives it a head start, but by the time Achilles reaches where the tortoise was, the tortoise has moved a little farther ahead. Again and again, this repeats. Each time Achilles gets closer, the tortoise moves just a bit further. According to Zeno, this goes on forever. Achilles never passes the tortoise. Or imagine the arrow frozen in flight. At any single instant, the arrow isn't moving. It occupies just one space. If every moment of its journey is motionless, how can motion exist at all? Zeno wasn't playing games. He was exposing a fracture in logic, a war between common sense and mathematics. He dared to suggest that the flow of time and movement we feel in our bones might be an illusion built on infinite steps we can never truly complete. The world seems smooth, but Zeno shows us the cracks. And though calculus and physics try to answer him, the unease remains. Because deep down, Zeno isn't just talking about running or arrows. He's talking about us, about whether progress, change, growth are ever real, or whether we are all just standing still in a universe that only seems to move. Panexperientialism. Panexperientialism is the eerie, enchanting belief that everything, every atom, every raindrop, every sliver of stone, feels something, not thought, not self-awareness, but experience in its rawest, faintest form. It's a philosophy that stretches consciousness far beyond brains and blood, whispering that awareness is not a human miracle, but a universal thread, that the world isn't made of dead matter, but of dim, flickering sparks of experience. This isn't fantasy. It's a serious metaphysical stance born from a brutal question. How did subjective experience, your inner world of color, pain, hunger, joy, emerge from lifeless particles? Neuroscience explains mechanisms, but not meaning. It tells us where in the brain pain registers, but not why it hurts to be. Panexperientialism steps in with a haunting proposal. Maybe experience didn't emerge at all. Maybe it was always there, small, scattered, mute. Maybe consciousness is built from a million microscopic pulses that already feel, just a little. It rewrites the universe. The wind brushing your skin isn't touching something inert. It's brushing against something that, in its own wordless way, knows it exists. The rock in your hand doesn't think, but it experiences being pressed, being held, not like we do, but not at all. This idea doesn't make the world magical. It makes it alive. It erases the cruel line between subject and object, watcher and watched, and it leaves you with a haunting, beautiful suspicion that you are not the only thing in this room with a soul. You are surrounded by quiet companions, feeling in silence. The hard problem of consciousness. The hard problem of consciousness is not about how the brain works. It's not about neurons firing or signals moving through gray matter. It's deeper, stranger. It's the question that haunts every philosopher, every neuroscientist, every soul who's ever looked inward and whispered, why does it feel like something to be me? You can map the brain. You can trace every synapse. You can watch electrical storms light up when someone sees a rose, tastes chocolate, hears a child's laughter. But none of that explains why there's an inner world behind those signals, why the smell of rain brings nostalgia, why heartbreak isn't just data, it's devastation, why joy blooms in the chest like fire. This is the hard problem. Why is there an experience at all, rather than just a complex machine silently computing in the dark? Science can explain behavior, it can explain function, but it can't explain qualia, the raw, subjective, what it's like of being conscious. You don't just register pain, you suffer. You don't just process color, you see red, and you know it. There's something it is like to be you. That something is not accounted for by biology alone. And here's the terrifying truth. We don't even know where to begin. Consciousness might be the most intimate thing we know, and yet we are completely alien to its source. We wake each morning inside a miracle we can't explain. We speak, dream, love, trapped in a mystery wrapped in flesh. And no matter how far we reach outward, this question burns inward, brighter than ever. Why do we feel anything at all? Value pluralism. Value pluralism is the quiet, unsettling truth that life is not ruled by one moral compass, but by many, each pulling in different directions, each valid in its own way. It says that there is no single highest good, no master principle that neatly resolves every ethical dilemma. Instead, the world is full of competing values, freedom and equality, justice and mercy, loyalty and truth. All of them matter, and sometimes they collide. It's not moral relativism. It's not saying anything goes. Value pluralism is sharper, harder. It says some values are better than others, but not always better. Sometimes they conflict, and no amount of reasoning can dissolve the tension. You might be forced to choose between telling the truth and protecting someone you love, between honoring tradition and fighting for progress, between justice for one and kindness for another, and whatever you choose, something good will be lost. This idea is beautiful and brutal because it means that moral tragedy isn't a mistake. It's built into life. You can be wise, kind, careful, and still be torn. You can do the best you can, and it still won't feel right. Value pluralism doesn't offer peace. It offers honesty. It tells you that growing up means letting go of perfect answers and learning to live inside the tension. And when you finally see that there's not one road, but many, and that all of them matter, that's when morality stops being a map. It becomes a balancing act, a human art. And sometimes, the best you can do is walk the tightrope with your eyes open and your heart breaking. Social ontology. Social ontology is the quiet, explosive study of the world we make, the invisible scaffolding that holds up our lives, not made of atoms, but of agreements. It asks, what is society made of? Not just people, but the structures, identities, norms, and roles that seem real, but vanish the moment we stop believing in them. Money, marriage, nations, corporations, prisons, none of these exist in nature, yet they rule us, move us, define us. Social ontology pulls back the curtain and reveals the collective hallucination we call reality. It's not that these things are fake, far from it. A border on a map may be imaginary, but step across it the wrong way, and you'll meet guns and laws. Social constructs are real because we treat them as real, because millions of minds agree to believe, and in that agreement, the fiction becomes fact. A person becomes a president. A sound becomes a slur. A piece of paper becomes your life savings. But beneath this shared trust lies something more fragile: power. Who decides what counts as real? Who gets to name things, categorize people, make rules and meanings? Social ontology reveals how reality is often dictated, not discovered, that your identity, your gender, your job, your status may be less about who you are and more about who society allows you to be. And once you see this, the world shifts. You stop asking, is this real? And start asking, who built this and for whom? Social reality is not just what is, it's what we've been taught to believe must be. Acratic action. Acratic action is the moment when reason breaks, when desire drowns logic, and you watch yourself do what you know you shouldn't, helpless, haunted, and fully aware. It's the cigarette lit after swearing you'd quit, the message sent at 2 a.m. you promised you wouldn't write, the extra drink, the skipped workout, the bitter words you regret before they leave your mouth. Acratic action is knowing better and doing it anyway. It's not ignorance. It's not accident. It's war between two selves, the one that sees clearly and the one that wants now. And when Akrasia wins, it leaves you hollowed out because there's no one else to blame. You had the better judgment. You just couldn't follow it. It's betrayal, but inward, a slow, internal collapse where willpower fades like a dying echo. Philosophers have agonized over this for centuries. How can we choose what we believe is the worst option? Are we weak, split in half? Is reason not enough to rule us? Socrates claimed true knowledge would never lead to wrongdoing, that if we really knew, we wouldn't falter. But Akrasia proves we're messier than that, human, fragile, torn between wisdom and impulse. This idea doesn't just expose failure, it explains so much of our suffering. It's why we sabotage relationships we want to save, why we chase comfort over purpose, why self-discipline feels like a battlefield. Acratic action is the echo of every time you whispered, I shouldn't, and did anyway. It's the tragedy of watching yourself fall and understanding exactly how, and still falling. The problem of the Criterion. The problem of the Criterion is a trap woven into the fabric of knowledge itself, a circular, suffocating question that unravels certainty with terrifying elegance. It asks, how do we know what we know? But more specifically, how do we know what's true without already knowing which methods lead to truth? And how do we choose those methods without already knowing what is true? It's a loop with no exit. You need a criterion, a standard, a rule for judging truth. But to establish that criterion, you first need to know something is true so you can test it. But to know something is true, you already need a valid criterion. So, which comes first, the knowledge or the standard, the facts or the filter? You can't pick one without begging the other, and suddenly, everything you believe is built on air. This isn't just philosophy, it's existential vertigo. It makes you question how you ever trusted your senses, your logic, your experience. You believe the earth orbits the sun, that 2 + 2 = 4, that your memories are yours. But why? What makes those beliefs knowledge instead of guesswork? Is it science, reason, revelation? Each answer circles back on itself, and if you dig deep enough, the foundations begin to tremble. Skeptics use this to paralyze. Dogmatists ignore it and charge ahead. But the truth is, it humbles you. It exposes how fragile your certainty really is, that every belief, no matter how solid, may rest on nothing more than faith in your own ability to recognize truth when you see it. And what if you can't? What if no one ever could? Libertarian free will. Libertarian free will is the defiant, burning belief that you are not just a puppet of atoms, that in a universe of causes and effects, there exists something sacred, unchained, and deeply yours. It says your choices are not the inevitable results of genetics, history, or neurons firing like dominoes. You are not just reacting, you are choosing, and that choice could have gone another way. This belief isn't casual. It's a rebellion against determinism. It insists that at the core of your being, there is a moment, however brief, where nothing but you decides. Not your past, not physics, you. The idea that, standing at a fork in the road, you could truly go left or right, not just appear to, not just feel like you could, but actually, meaningfully, freely could. It's intoxicating. It's terrifying, because if this freedom is real, then so is responsibility in its most brutal form. You're not just shaped by circumstance. You're accountable beyond it. Every cruel word, every betrayal, every leap of courage or act of mercy, it wasn't fate. It was you. No excuses, no rewinding the tape and blaming the program. But libertarian free will is under siege. Neuroscience suggests our decisions may be made before we're conscious of them. Determinists claim the illusion of choice is just that, an illusion. And yet, even as science maps the brain, millions still feel it, that flicker of agency, that sacred pause before a decision where you could choose differently. Libertarian free will doesn't need proof to matter. It lives in the space between impulse and action. In the moment you say, no, I will not be ruled. And for that single breath, you are utterly, frighteningly free. Compatibilism. Compatibilism is the desperate, defiant hope that freedom and fate are not enemies, that even in a world ruled by cause and effect, you can still choose. It stands at the crossroads of one of philosophy's oldest, most tormenting conflicts. If everything is determined by physics, biology, history, then are you anything more than a puppet of forces you didn't choose? And yet, deep in your bones, you feel it. I could have done otherwise. Compatibilism says yes, the universe might be a chain of causes stretching back to the Big Bang. Yes, your brain follows the laws of nature like dominoes falling in sequence. But no, that doesn't mean you're not responsible, because freedom, the compatibilist claims, isn't about breaking the chain. It's about being a link that belongs there, a cause in itself, acting according to your reasons, your desires, your character. If no one forced you, if your decision flowed from who you are, then that was free will. even if you were shaped by causes, even if those causes go back forever. It's not the freedom to float above the world. It's the freedom to be yourself within it, to choose your path, not outside of nature, but from within your nature. Compatibilism doesn't erase the cold logic of determinism. It doesn't pretend we're gods, but it protects something sacred: responsibility, moral judgment, human dignity. It lets you say, I did this, not just, it happened. And in that quiet declaration, fragile yet unbroken, lies the core of what it means to be human. The infinite regress problem. The infinite regress problem is the philosophical sinkhole beneath every why. It begins as a question, innocent enough. Why is this the case? You answer. But then comes the next question. Why that? Then another, and before long, you're falling, spiraling through a chain of causes, reasons, and justifications that never ends. Every answer demands another, like Russian dolls with no final shell, no ground, just layers collapsing into forever. This problem haunts every attempt at ultimate explanation. Why does the universe exist? Because of the Big Bang. But what caused the Big Bang? And what caused that? It doesn't stop. Even in logic and knowledge, it cuts deep. You believe something because of evidence, but why trust that evidence? Eventually, you reach a terrifying precipice. Either accept an infinite regress or declare something just is, an unprovable foundation, a brute fact, a final because. Neither option is comforting. An endless regress offers no stability, no moment where the ground is solid, but stopping the regress feels arbitrary, like cheating, so we dance around it. Religions invoke God as the uncaused cause, scientists speak of fundamental laws, philosophers argue for self-evident truths, but the regress still lingers, a silent weight beneath every structure of thought. And in that abyss lies a question as old as consciousness. Is there ever a final answer, or are we just layering meaning atop a mystery we were never meant to solve? The infinite regress problem doesn't demand we stop asking. It dares us to keep going, even when we know the ladder may never end. The lottery paradox. The lottery paradox is a quiet betrayal of logic, an unsettling moment when belief turns against itself. Imagine a massive lottery, 1,000,000 tickets, one guaranteed winner. You look at ticket no. 1. The odds are microscopic. You believe it won't win. Same for ticket no. 2 and ticket no. 3. In fact, for every single ticket, your belief that it won't win is totally rational. And yet, you also know with certainty that one ticket will win. That contradiction, that's the paradox. It's not just a riddle. It's a crack in the foundation of rational thought. You hold 1,000 justified beliefs, but together they add up to something you know is false. You believe every individual claim, this ticket will lose, but their total sum, all tickets will lose, can't be true. Something doesn't fit, something slips. You begin to realize that even logic, our prized compass, can fracture under pressure. The lottery paradox strikes at the heart of how we form beliefs. It says, even when you're perfectly reasonable, perfectly justified, your beliefs can betray the truth. It whispers that certainty is fragile and that coherence is not guaranteed. This isn't just about numbers, it's about life, about trusting each small judgment, each cautious doubt, while sensing that somewhere the full picture proves you wrong. You can believe in every piece and still be misled by the puzzle they build. The lottery paradox doesn't scream. It doesn't crash your world. It just leaves you standing there, holding a stack of reasonable thoughts, while the truth quietly slips through your fingers. The principle of sufficient reason. The principle of sufficient reason is the haunting belief that nothing happens without a cause, without a reason, without an explanation waiting to be uncovered. It is the quiet engine behind science,
logic, religion, and philosophy. The demand that for every flicker of existence, there must be a why. Why this event? Why this person? Why this universe? Here, now. It feels intuitive. A glass falls. Something must have pushed it. A star explodes. Something triggered it. You feel pain. There must be a source. Randomness, we're told, is only an illusion born from ignorance. Even if we don't know the cause, one must be there. This principle is comforting. It tells us the world is not chaos. It is knowable, understandable, tame. But then the questions go deeper. What caused the universe? What reason explains being itself? What justifies existence over non-existence? And suddenly, the principle begins to tremble, because if everything must have a reason, then what caused the first cause? And if something doesn't need a cause, why not the universe itself? Why not you? The principle of sufficient reason drives us to dig, to uncover, to demand meaning, but it also threatens to collapse under its own weight. It's a loop with no exit, a quest with no final answer. Some use it to prove God, others to dismantle God. Some believe it with their whole soul, others call it a beautiful illusion. But once the principle has you, it doesn't let go. It lives in every why you've ever whispered in the dark, and it won't stop asking until you answer or fall silent in awe. Ontological pluralism. Ontological pluralism is the profound, unsettling idea that being isn't one size fits all, that existence itself comes in kinds, in layers, in ways. It says not everything that is exists in the same way. A rock is, a number is, a story is, but none of them are in quite the same sense. Ontological pluralism doesn't just say there are different things, it says there are different modes of being. And suddenly, reality is not flat. It's textured, multidimensional, strange. This idea cracks open the cold, mechanical view of the universe. It suggests that trying to treat love like mass or justice like atoms is a category mistake, that not everything must answer to the same ontological laws. The way a tree exists in a forest is not the way a fictional character exists in a novel, or the way a memory exists in your mind, but each is real in its own domain. They matter. They shape us. They are. Ontological pluralism calls out our obsession with reductionism, the desperate need to squash every mystery into one uniform box labeled matter or truth. It whispers that the universe is more generous than that maybe there's more than one kind of real, more than one kind of truth. It forces you to look at the world with reverence, to realize that being isn't a single note, but a chord, that your thoughts, your relationships, your stories, your soul, they all exist, not less than a rock, but differently. And maybe, just maybe, reality is not a thing. It's a symphony, and every mode of being plays its part. Accidental necessity. Accidental necessity is a chilling twist in how we think about time, a paradox that whispers, what once could have been otherwise, now never could have been anything else. It's the idea that past events, though once open, fluid, and uncertain, become fixed the moment they happen. They solidify, and from that moment on, they feel as if they were always meant to be, even though they weren't. Imagine a coin toss. Before it lands, it could be heads or tails, completely contingent, entirely up in the air. But the moment it hits the ground, it becomes locked in history. It had to be heads because now it was. There's no rewinding, no redoing, no escaping the fact that what happened, happened. And that's where the terror begins. Because this idea stretches far beyond coins. It touches everything. The lover you lost, the life you almost lived, the mistake you made that you can never take back. At the time, you had choices. At the time, it was still being written. But now, it feels inevitable, necessary, like it could never have gone any other way. Accidental necessity exposes a quiet cruelty in time.
how it transforms freedom into fate, how it turns open roads into single tracks with no exits, and it leaves us haunted by the weight of decisions that once floated like feathers, but now fall like stones. You once stood at a crossroads. You could have gone left. You could have gone right, but you went forward. And now, no matter how much you look back, it's as if you never had a choice at all. Dialectical materialism. Dialectical materialism is the relentless heartbeat of history. The Marxist view that human progress isn't guided by ideals or morality, but by conflict. Not conflict of thoughts, but of things, labor and capital, poverty and wealth, ownership and exploitation. It sees society not as a steady climb, but as a battlefield of opposing forces, oppressor and oppressed, locked in a violent dance that gives rise to change. At its core, dialectical materialism says this: material conditions, your access to food, shelter, tools, wages, shape your beliefs, your politics, your sense of self. You are not born into a neutral world. You are born into a structure. And your ideas are not floating freely. They rise from your position in that structure. You don't just live under capitalism. You think through it. You feel through it. Even your dreams wear its chains. The dialectic is the clash. Thesis and antithesis, locked in struggle, birthing something new, synthesis. This is how change happens, not from enlightenment, not from compromise, but from tension reaching a breaking point. The serf and the lord, the worker and the boss. History to Marx is not a story of reason, it's a story of resistance. This philosophy is fire. It refuses to see inequality as accident. It demands we stop asking what's wrong with the system and start seeing the system as the wrong. It makes you look at comfort with suspicion. It makes you see blood beneath the wealth. Dialectical materialism doesn't just explain history. It warns you, if there's no justice, the struggle will return, and next time, it will come louder. The is-ought problem. The is-ought problem is a quiet chasm that splits the world of facts from the world of values, a tear in the fabric of logic that no amount of knowledge can stitch shut. It was David Hume who exposed it, unsettling generations of philosophers with one brutal insight. You can describe the world all you want, but that will never tell you what you ought to do. No amount of is will ever magically become an ought. You can say people are suffering, that children are starving, that ecosystems are collapsing. These are facts, real, measurable, devastating. But the leap to therefore we should help them, therefore we must act, doesn't come from the facts alone. It comes from somewhere else, something deeper, unprovable, felt rather than seen. And that's where the trouble begins. Because if you can't get ought from is, then morality doesn't ride in on the back of science. You can know every detail about human psychology, the chemistry of empathy, the structure of the universe, and still be unable to prove that kindness is better than cruelty. The facts sit there, silent, indifferent. They don't care what you do. This gap is terrifying because it isolates moral responsibility. It says, you must bring the value. The world won't hand it to you. It won't whisper what's right. You must choose. You must care. The is-ought problem doesn't just point to a flaw in logic. It forces you to realize that morality lives outside the cold machinery of the universe. It lives in you, and if you don't speak the ought into existence, no one else will. Akrasia. Akrasia is the heartbreak of watching yourself break your own promise. It's the ache of knowing what's right, what's best, what your wiser self decided in a clear moment, and then doing the opposite anyway. You say you'll go to bed early, eat better, apologize, leave, stay, choose the path that heals, and yet, when the moment arrives, you don't. You can't. You won't. That's akrasia, weakness of will. It's not ignorance. It's not confusion. It's clarity ignored. It's the split inside you, the self that knows versus the self that wants. You become two people in the same body, watching your better judgment lose to the pull of comfort, impulse, or fear, and afterward you're left hollow because no one lied to you but you, and you remember the moment you looked yourself in the eye and walked away. Philosophers have battled Akrasia for millennia. Socrates denied its existence. He couldn't believe anyone would knowingly choose the worse, but we do, every day. We are creatures of contradiction. We write goals in the morning and betray them by night. We sabotage our joy, delay our peace, and still cling to the illusion of control. Akrasia hurts because it exposes how fragile freedom really is. It shows you that knowing the path isn't enough. You have to walk it, even when every cell screams otherwise. And sometimes you'll fail, not because you don't care, but because caring isn't always enough. Akrasia isn't weakness alone. It's the human condition, noble minds dragged by ancient instincts, and the quiet, painful knowledge that the hardest battle you'll ever fight is the one inside yourself. Cognitive closure. Cognitive closure is the humbling, almost unbearable idea that some truths, perhaps the deepest ones, may forever lie beyond the reach of the human mind, not because we haven't figured them out yet, but because we can't, because the architecture of our brains, the limits of our language, the boundaries of our senses are simply not built to hold certain answers, like trying to pour an ocean into a teacup. It whispers a quiet rebellion against human arrogance. We've sent rockets to the edge of space, mapped the genome, built machines that think. And yet, when we ask the most primal questions, what is consciousness? What is time? Why is there something rather than nothing? We run into walls, not temporary obstacles, but the edges of a cage we can't see from the inside. Imagine a dog trying to understand quantum mechanics. Now imagine us trying to grasp the full nature of the universe. The comparison may be generous. Cognitive closure doesn't mock us. It mourns with us. It knows how deeply we want to know. It feels the ache of every mystic, every physicist, every child who stares at the stars and asks, "What is this really?" Some philosophers resist this idea. It feels like surrender. But to others, it is a strange kind of reverence. It means the cosmos still holds secrets it refuses to reveal. That wonder is not just temporary, but permanent. We are brilliant, but maybe we are not built for everything. And in that helplessness, that beautiful smallness, a different kind of truth emerges. The truth that not all truth is ours to hold. Double effect principle. The double effect principle is a razor-edge rule of morality, a haunting attempt to make peace with the truth that sometimes doing good means causing harm. It says that if your action is aimed at a good end and the harm that comes from it is not intended but merely a side effect, then that action might still be morally permissible. It is the ethics of the trembling hand, the heavy heart, the impossible choice. You drop bombs to stop a genocide. Some innocents die. You give a dying patient morphine to ease pain, knowing it will shorten their life. You save a mother in childbirth, and the baby cannot survive. You didn't mean to harm, but harm happened. You aimed at the good. You struck both. The double effect principle is not a loophole. It's not an excuse. It's a cry for clarity in moments drenched in tragedy. It demands that the harm not be your goal, not your tool. You can't kill to save, but if what you do incidentally causes death while trying to save, there is a moral difference. Thin, chilling, but real. This principle forces you to stand in the shadow of your own values and ask, was my aim pure? Was the harm avoidable? Did I act from mercy or calculation? It's not about feeling good. It's about shouldering the unbearable tension of moral responsibility. The double effect principle doesn't offer comfort. It offers a lifeline in the storm of ethical catastrophe, because sometimes life demands you act and then live with the wound of what your goodness could not prevent. The tragedy of the commons. The tragedy of the commons is a slow-motion disaster, one where no one wants to be the villain,
yet everyone plays a part. It unfolds whenever individuals acting in their own self-interest exploit a shared resource, believing their small impact won't matter. But when everyone thinks that way, the resource collapses. The forest is stripped bare, the fish are gone, the air turns toxic, and the tragedy is not just in the outcome, it's in the logic that leads us there. It starts innocently. A farmer lets one more cow graze on public land. A company dumps just a little more waste into the river. A commuter drives instead of walking. The benefit is personal, immediate. The cost is distant, shared. It feels harmless, rational even. But multiplied by millions, that rationality becomes ruin. No one meant to destroy the commons, but everyone did. And the horror lies in its inevitability, because the commons, whether it's the atmosphere, clean water, privacy, or trust, belongs to everyone, but is protected by no one. There is no guardian, no god of restraint, only us, and we are torn between what helps me now and what saves us later. The tragedy of the commons isn't just about nature, it's about human nature. It's about the terrifying gap between individual choice and collective consequence, and it asks a question we still haven't answered. Can we choose restraint, knowing others may not? Can we protect what we all need, even when no one is watching? Or will we, again and again, trade tomorrow for today, and only mourn it when it's gone? No self-theory. The no-self theory is a blade that slices through everything you thought you were. It whispers the unthinkable. There is no enduring you, no permanent soul, no unchanging self behind your eyes, just a swirl of thoughts, memories, emotions, and sensations, ever shifting, ever fleeting. You are not the river, you are the current. And once you see it, the illusion of a solid I begins to crack. Buddhist philosophy called it anatta. Neuroscience now echoes it. When you look for the self in the brain, some center, some control room, it isn't there. Just networks, processes, passing flashes of awareness. The story you tell yourself about who you are is just that, a story, comforting, continuous, but stitched together from fragments that don't hold up under light. You say I as if it means something whole, but your personality shifts with moods, your beliefs change with time, your identity crumbles and reforms with every trauma, every joy. Where is the constant? Where is the self that doesn't age, falter, dissolve? This idea isn't just philosophical, it's existential, because if there is no fixed self, then what is there to defend? To fear losing? To grieve? The no-self theory can feel like annihilation, but it can also feel like freedom. If you are not a thing, but a process, then perhaps you are never trapped, never stuck, always becoming. And maybe, just maybe, peace lies not in discovering who you are, but in letting go of the need to be someone at all. Hume's guillotine. Hume's guillotine is a cold slice through the heart of moral certainty, a ruthless division that says no matter how deeply we describe the world, we can never derive from it what we ought to do. You can study the stars, map the brain, chart every human behavior, but from those facts alone, you cannot extract a single commandment. You cannot leap from is to ought. David Hume saw this centuries ago, and it remains one of the most unsettling truths in moral philosophy. You can say people lie, cheat, hurt, love, sacrifice. You can show what humans are like, but none of that tells you what they should be. The moment someone says, because this is natural, it's good, they've crossed the line, and Hume's blade comes down. It's terrifying because we crave moral clarity. We want science to tell us what's right. We want nature to justify our instincts. We want to believe that looking closely enough at reality will give us meaning. But Hume says, no, description is not prescription. The world doesn't owe you values. This guillotine forces a harsh reckoning. If facts alone can't guide morality, then we must choose our values, invent them, build them, defend them not as truths revealed,
but as truths created. It means ethics isn't a mirror of the universe, it's a mirror of us.
And yet, that's what makes it sacred, because if morality can't be found in what is, then maybe it lives in what could be, not carved in stone, but written in hope. And that hope begins not with answers, but with choice.
Moral realism versus anti-realism. Moral realism versus anti-realism is the battle for the soul of ethics. It's a question that haunts every choice you make, every judgment you pass. Are moral truths real, solid, objective, unshakable, or are they inventions born from biology, culture, fear, or need? This isn't academic, it's existential, because if moral realism is right, then when you say murder is wrong, you're describing something as true as gravity. But if anti-realism wins, then wrong is just a word, an echo of emotion, not a universal fact. Moral realists believe that some things are just right or wrong, no matter who you are, where you live, or what you believe. That cruelty is wrong on Mars as it is on Earth. That justice doesn't bend to opinion. That ethics is not a mirror of society, but a light that can judge it. It offers hope that we can build a better world, not just a different one. But anti-realists see something darker and perhaps more honest. They argue that morality is a beautifully constructed fiction, that values aren't found, they're made, that evolution gave us moral instincts to survive, not to uncover cosmic truth, that what you call wrong might just be what your culture taught you to hate. For them, ethics is not a discovery, it's a creation. This divide cuts deep because it touches what kind of creatures we believe we are. Are we uncovering eternal truths or just comforting ourselves with stories? Is morality a compass given to us by the universe, or a map we've drawn in the dark, hoping it leads somewhere worth going? The simulation argument. The simulation argument is a philosophical lightning strike, a mind-bending idea that what you see, touch, and live may not be real in the way you think. It proposes that you, right now, reading these words, might be nothing more than lines of code, that this world, its colors, its people, its pain, could be the output of a hyper-advanced computer simulation run by beings you will never meet, for reasons you will never know. This isn't a sci-fi plot. It's a logical structure built by philosopher Nick Bostrom, and it begins with unsettling simplicity. If it becomes possible for future civilizations to simulate conscious beings, and if they run even one such simulation, then the number of simulated minds would vastly outnumber real ones. Statistically, it would be more likely you're one of them, a character in someone else's game, a dream in a machine. Every moment you've called real, every kiss, every heartbreak, every triumph could be scripted. Maybe they're watching, maybe they're testing, maybe they've already deleted 1,000 versions of you that failed. And the horrifying beauty of it? There's no obvious way to know. The laws of physics might just be the settings, your memories manufactured, your choices calculated. But the simulation argument doesn't just unravel reality, it stabs at meaning. If this is a simulation, do your feelings still matter? If your pain is coded, is it still pain? If nothing is real, why live like it is? And yet, even if it's true, if this is all pixels and algorithms, your experience still burns with intensity. So maybe the deeper question isn't, are we in a simulation? Maybe it's, would it change anything if we were? Occam's razor. Occam's razor is the blade that cuts through chaos, the elegant principle that, when faced with competing explanations, the simplest one is often the best. It whispers that truth doesn't need decoration, that when all else is equal, the answer with the fewest assumptions is the one most likely to be right. Not the flashiest, not the one that makes us feel safe, just the one that fits without stretching. It's a principle born not out of arrogance, but humility. Because humans love complexity, we invent grand conspiracies, add layers of intention, fill gaps in knowledge with wild stories, because mystery frightens us more than error. But Occam's razor asks us to resist that urge, to trust that sometimes the answer really is what it looks like. You hear footsteps in the hall at night. Could it be a ghost, an intruder, a message from another dimension? Maybe. But maybe it's just your cat. The razor doesn't say the cat is definitely right. It says, start there. This principle is everywhere, in science, medicine, philosophy, but it's also deeply personal. It challenges the narratives we spin to make sense of heartbreak, failure, fear. Sometimes they left because they stopped loving you, not because of some secret reason. Sometimes you failed because you didn't prepare. No cosmic punishment, no deeper meaning, just simplicity. Occam's razor doesn't make the world less magical. It makes it more honest. And sometimes, honesty is the sharpest tool we have, because in a world addicted to noise, clarity is an act of courage. Trolley problem. The trolley problem is a moral gut punch dressed as a thought experiment. It begins with a simple, brutal scenario. A runaway trolley is barreling down a track toward 5 people tied up and unable to move. You stand near a lever. If you pull it, the trolley will switch tracks, saving the 5, but kill 1 person on the other side. Do you pull it? It sounds clinical, even mathematical, 1 life versus 5. But the moment you imagine their faces, real people, with names, with families, the question turns to fire, because it's not just about numbers, it's about guilt, about blood on your hands, about doing harm versus allowing harm. If you do nothing, 5 die. If you act, 1 dies, because you made it happen. And that's just the start. Variations twist the knife deeper. What if the 1 person is your child? What if you must push someone onto the track to stop the trolley? What if the 5 are criminals and the 1 is innocent? The dilemma spirals, each version stripping away the comfort of moral certainty. The trolley problem lives because it rips open the divide between intention and consequence. It forces you to confront the terrifying possibility that doing the right thing might still feel wrong. That moral clarity may not exist in the real world. Only pain, only cost. In the end, the trolley problem isn't about tracks or levers. It's about you. What kind of person are you when every option ends in suffering, when every path leaves a scar? The problem doesn't ask for a solution. It asks, can you live with the choice you make? Eternalism. Eternalism is a radical, haunting view of time that says every moment, past, present, and future, is equally real. That means your birth is happening right now, just as vividly as your death, your first heartbreak, your last breath, your tomorrow morning coffee. They all exist, permanently etched into the fabric of the universe. You are not moving through time. You are in time, everywhere, all at once. It shatters how we usually think. We imagine the past as gone, the future as open. We believe the present is the only thing that's real. But eternalism sees time not as a river, but as a landscape. You're not drifting forward. You're a fixed figure in a vast, unchanging terrain, with every second carved into reality like coordinates on a map. This view is both comforting and deeply unsettling. Comforting because the moments you miss aren't truly lost. Somewhere, you are still laughing with a friend who's gone. Somewhere, you are still being held by someone who can no longer hold you. Unsettling because the future, your future, is already there, waiting. And if all times are equally real, then maybe your choices aren't as free as you think. Maybe the ending is already written. Eternalism forces you to ask, what does it mean to live if you are not moving forward, but merely uncovering what's already there? It doesn't erase meaning, it intensifies it. Because if every moment always exists, then every moment matters. Even the ones you thought were gone forever, they're still there. You just can't reach them anymore. Presentism. Presentism is the raw, radical belief that only the now exists, that the past is gone, the future not yet real, and all that is is this fleeting, burning moment. It doesn't mean live in the moment. It means there is nothing else. The past isn't hiding behind you. It has vanished. The future isn't waiting ahead. It hasn't arrived. Reality is not a line. It's a flash, a flicker, a single relentless present. This idea is both comforting and cruel. Comforting because it frees you from the weight of the past. You are not your history, your regrets, or your mistakes. They are ghosts, echoes with no substance. The only real thing is what you do now, the breath you're taking, the heartbeat pounding in your chest. Nothing else is solid, but it's also devastating. Because if only the present exists, then every joy, every love, every person you've lost, they don't exist anymore. Not in any real sense. They're not stored somewhere in the folds of time. They're gone. And everything you dream of, hope for, plan for, not real either. Just thoughts whispering through a moment that will soon be gone too. Presentism asks you to accept this, that time is not a river flowing behind and ahead. It's a single drop, endlessly falling, always vanishing. The present is all you ever have, all you ever will. And every second you spend chasing what's behind or waiting for what's ahead is a second that was never truly yours. Four-dimensionalism. Four-dimensionalism is the mind-bending idea that you are not a momentary dot flickering through time, but a stretched being, a long, continuous entity extended not just in space, but in time. Just like a statue has width, depth, and height, you have temporal length. You are not just who you are now, you are your entire life, laid out like a living thread, from first breath to final silence. This means the baby you once were, the person you are now, and the future self still waiting to exist. They're all equally real, not memories, not projections, but slices of a four-dimensional you. You are not just in time, you are time, shaped and stretched across it like sculpture. It's a vision that changes everything. Death doesn't erase you, it simply closes the shape. Birth doesn't start you, it reveals the beginning of your curve. You're not passing through time like a train down a track. You are the train, the track, the entire ride, existing all at once from a higher perspective. Time becomes space, events become places. Four-dimensionalism is a kind of immortality, but not the kind we crave. You don't escape death. You remain in it, just as you remain in youth, in joy, in pain. Every experience you've ever had still exists, frozen into the structure of the universe, long after you forget it, long after anyone remembers you. You are not just a moment, you are a shape, and somewhere in that vast temporal body, the best parts of you are still happening. They always will be. Causal closure. Causal closure is the cold, uncompromising doctrine that the physical world is a sealed system, locked tight, without gaps, without exceptions. It declares that everything that happens in the physical realm is caused entirely by other physical things. Every thought, every action, every event is just atoms pushing atoms, fields pulling fields. No spirits, no souls, no mind reaching in from outside. Just physics. Unbroken, complete. At first glance, it seems obvious. A glass falls because gravity pulls it. Your heart races because chemicals surge. But then it reaches deeper, into your mind, your feelings, your choices, your sense of self. Are they just the shadows of neurons firing in sequence? If causal closure is true, then there is no room for anything non-physical to do anything. No ghost in the machine, no divine whisper, no true mental causation, just cause, effect, matter. This idea shatters comfort. It means that if you believe in an immaterial soul, it can't touch the world. If you believe in free will, your choices must be physical results of physical causes, or illusions dressed in agency. Even your love, your grief, your wonder, each one a biological process, measurable, reducible, explainable. Causal closure leaves no mystery behind, but in doing so it leaves many aching. It forces the question, If the universe needs nothing but itself to run, then what are we really? Are we more than machines made of meat and light? Or are we just passengers watching sparks dance in a cage of bone, forever mistaking fire for freedom? Moral relativism. Moral relativism is the unsettling truth that right and wrong might not be written into the stars, but carved into culture, language, and individual hearts. It's the idea that morality isn't universal, but relative, shaped by where you're born, what you're taught, who you are. What one society calls justice, another calls cruelty. What feels sacred to you might be meaningless to someone else, and both could be right or neither. This view doesn't say anything goes, it says everything depends. It forces you to see morality not as an eternal law, but as a lens. Through it, ancient customs once seen as noble now seem barbaric, and modern values praised today might one day be condemned. It reveals that your deepest moral convictions, your rage at injustice, your praise of freedom, your grief for the oppressed, might be echoes of your culture, not glimpses of cosmic truth. That's what makes moral relativism so hard to swallow. It feels like standing on shifting sand. It strips away the comfort of certainty and dares you to live without a moral compass that points north for everyone. It demands humility. It whispers, you might be wrong, even about what you believe most fiercely. But it also opens the door to empathy. It invites you to listen instead of judge, to ask, what do they see that I don't? It doesn't erase morality. It softens it, makes it human, fragile, negotiable. In a world at war over whose values should win, moral relativism doesn't give easy answers. It gives a mirror, and in that mirror, you might see not the enemy, but yourself, wearing different skin. Moral absolutism. Moral absolutism is the fierce, immovable belief that some actions are always right or always wrong, no matter the situation, no matter the consequences, no matter who commits them. It is ethics carved in stone. To the moral absolutist, there are lines you do not cross, not for love, not for war, not even to save the world. It says that murder is wrong, even if it stops more violence, that torture is evil, even if it saves lives, that betrayal is still betrayal, no matter how noble the motive. It doesn't bend for tears or twist for pragmatism, and that's what makes it feel both holy and terrifying. Moral absolutism appeals to something deep inside us, the need for clarity in a chaotic world. When everything feels gray, it offers black and white. It's why we admire people who hold to principle when it costs them everything, why we tell stories of heroes who refuse to lie, even to defeat evil. It speaks to our hunger for truth that doesn't flinch, but it also demands sacrifice, because sometimes following an absolute rule means letting someone suffer. Sometimes it means being hated, misunderstood, even condemned. It means doing what you believe is right, especially when it hurts, especially when others wouldn't. To the moral absolutist, ethics isn't about outcome, it's about integrity. It's not about what works, it's about what is. And in a world that constantly begs you to compromise, it dares to ask, would you still choose the good, even if it broke your heart, even if it cost you everything? Constructivism. Constructivism is the radical, empowering idea that knowledge isn't something poured into your mind. It's something you build, brick by brick, layer by layer. Every thought, every belief, every truth you hold was constructed by you, not handed down like stone tablets from some higher authority. You are not a vessel, you are an architect. This theory shatters the myth of passive learning, that facts just enter us through books or teachers or screens. Constructivism says, no, you don't absorb knowledge, you make it by connecting it to what you already know, to what you've lived, to who you are. Two people can hear the same lesson and walk away with different truths, because learning isn't transmission, it's transformation. It means your mind isn't a camera, it's a forge. When you learn, you're not just collecting data, You're reshaping your worldview, adjusting your foundation, adding scaffolding to your understanding of reality. And it's why true learning feels hard, because it should. You're not memorizing, you're rebuilding yourself. But constructivism is also humbling. It reminds us that no one holds the pure truth. Everyone's knowledge is filtered, formed by culture, emotion, memory. What we call facts are often interpretations, stitched into meaning through experience. And yet, this is what makes it beautiful, because if knowledge is constructed, then learning is liberation. You are not waiting for wisdom to arrive. You're creating it every time you think deeply, question honestly, or change your mind. And that means your world isn't fixed. It's still being built by you. Instrumental rationality. Instrumental rationality is the cold engine at the core of decision-making. The idea that to be rational is not about choosing what's right, but choosing what works. It's the principle that says, given a goal, the rational thing to do is whatever best achieves it. No moral compass, no emotional comfort, just pure, relentless efficiency between ends and means. It's the logic of survival, of strategy, of success. If you want to stay warm, build a fire. If you want power, use persuasion or manipulation. If you want peace, wage war, if that's what it takes. Instrumental rationality doesn't care what your goal is. It only asks, how can you reach it fastest, most effectively, with the least waste? It's the reason machines can outthink us, why algorithms make terrifyingly good decisions, because they don't hesitate, they don't moralize, they optimize. But for humans, it's a double-edged blade, because we aren't just goal seekers, we're meaning makers. We don't just want results, we want to matter. And instrumental rationality can lead you to horrific places if the goal itself is wrong. Genocide can be rational if the end is twisted enough. Deceit becomes logical if truth is inconvenient. When reason serves a broken purpose, it becomes a weapon dressed as wisdom. Instrumental rationality is powerful, yes, but it's indifferent. It gets you where you're going, but it won't tell you where to go. That part is still up to you, and if you don't ask why you want something, it will lead you anywhere, even into ruin, with perfect, merciless logic. Eco-philosophy. Eco-philosophy is not just a way of thinking. It's a cry from the earth itself, a reckoning, a plea. It asks the oldest questions in the context we've long ignored. What does it mean to be human in a world we did not create? What is our place among the trees, the rivers, the animals whose silence we mistake for consent? It is philosophy with dirt under its nails and rain in its lungs. It does not look up to the stars. It looks down into the soil where roots speak a truth older than language. At its core, eco-philosophy challenges the lie of separation, the illusion that humans are above, beyond, or outside nature. It tears through the arrogance that places mankind at the center of value and meaning. It whispers what indigenous traditions have always known, that we are not owners of the earth, but threads in its web, and when we pull too hard, the whole thing shakes. This philosophy doesn't just ask what we owe to the planet, it asks what we've forgotten: awe, reciprocity, humility. It's not about preserving nature like a museum exhibit. It's about belonging to it again, relearning the rhythms of wildness, hearing the heartbeat in the wind, recognizing that the destruction of ecosystems is not just a crisis, it's a spiritual wound. Eco-philosophy refuses to separate ethics from ecology. It reminds us that to poison the water is to poison the self, that to cut the forest is to silence a cathedral, and that maybe the redemption of humanity begins with remembering we were never separate from the world we are destroying. We were always home. We just forgot. Post-structuralism. Post-structuralism is the philosophical earthquake that shook the foundations of truth, meaning, and identity. It tells us that what we believe to be solid, language, morality, knowledge, Even the self isn't built on bedrock, but on shifting sands shaped by power, culture, and history. Nothing means exactly what we think it does. Every word is haunted by other words. Every truth is entangled in who gets to speak, who gets heard, and who gets erased. It was born as a rebellion against neat systems, grand narratives, and the arrogant belief that human thought could perfectly map reality. Thinkers like Derrida, Foucault, and Barthes didn't want to burn meaning down. They wanted to show that meaning was never fixed to begin with, that texts don't have one true reading, that identities aren't pure but constructed, that what we call truth often hides the fingerprints of those in power. Post-structuralism doesn't offer comfort, it unravels. It shows how language betrays itself, how even your deepest beliefs may not be truly yours, but borrowed from scripts you never wrote. It forces you to ask, who taught me to speak this way? Who benefits from what I believe? To some, this is liberating. It means nothing is sacred, and everything can be rewritten. To others, it's terrifying. If meaning isn't stable, how can we stand for anything? But that's the point. Post-structuralism doesn't destroy meaning. It reveals its fragility. It says, you are not standing on a rock. You are dancing on a web, and every step, every word, every truth is a negotiation between freedom and control. Anarchism. Anarchism is not chaos. It's not fire in the streets or a world without rules. It's a deeper, more defiant idea that authority, wherever it exists, must justify itself or fall. Anarchism is the belief that no one has the right to rule another by default. Not kings, not presidents, not bosses, not priests. If power exists, it must earn its place or be dismantled. At its heart, anarchism is a cry for dignity. It sees hierarchy not as order, but as control. It looks at governments, corporations, militaries, and even families and asks, who gave you the right? It sees how power can corrupt even the kindest hand, how obedience can rot the soul, and how freedom, true freedom, is not granted from above, but built together from below. Anarchism doesn't reject organization, it rejects domination. It dreams of communities based on mutual aid, voluntary cooperation, and shared responsibility. It believes people are capable of governing themselves, not perfectly, but more justly than any imposed system ever could. It demands a world where no one has to bow to survive. But anarchism is not naive. It knows the cost of resistance. It knows the brutality of systems that don't want to be questioned. It knows how deeply hierarchy is woven into our minds, our schools, our homes. Still, it refuses to stop imagining something better. Anarchism is fire, but not destruction. It is the fire of liberation, of tearing down walls built on fear and lighting the way toward a world where no one kneels and everyone stands. Object-oriented ontology, OOO, is a radical reordering of the cosmos, a defiant rejection of the human-centered gaze. It declares that objects exist in their own right, with their own realities, utterly independent of what we think, see, or feel about them. A chair is not just for sitting. A tree is not just beautiful. A cloud does not need your awe. OOO tells us you are not the center of the universe, not even close. This philosophy dares to decenter human perception. It says that the world is made of things, and those things are not passive. They are not just there to be used, observed, or understood by us. Every object, whether a pebble, a black hole, a spoon, or a dream, has its own existence, withdrawn, mysterious, inaccessible. You can interact with it, but you can never fully know it. Its being is deeper than your gaze. OOO rips down the hierarchy we've built for centuries, where humans stand above, naming, classifying, controlling. Instead, it levels the field. You are just another object among countless others, And maybe to a tree, you are the background noise. To a mountain, you are the fleeting phenomenon. It's humbling and deeply unsettling, because if reality isn't shaped around us, then what is our role in it? What if things don't need meaning to exist? What if existence itself isn't about us at all? Object-oriented ontology whispers a simple, shattering truth. The world is full of things that are real in ways we will never grasp, and they don't need us to matter. They already do. Eudaimonia is not happiness, not the quick high of a joke, or the glow of a glass of wine, or even the comfort of being loved. It's deeper, older. It's the ancient Greek vision of what it means to live well, to flourish, to become who you truly are, not by chasing pleasure, but by cultivating virtue, not by avoiding hardship, but by growing through it. For Aristotle, eudaimonia wasn't a feeling. It was a state of being, a life lived in alignment with reason, with purpose, with excellence. It meant choosing courage when fear made you small, choosing justice when selfishness was easier, choosing honesty when a lie would protect you. It's not the life that feels good in the moment. It's the life you can stand before at the end and say, this was worthy. Eudaimonia demands effort. It asks you to take responsibility for your soul. It doesn't care if you're comfortable. It cares if you're becoming. It is not something that happens to you. It's something you build, choice by choice, day by day, often in silence, often without applause. And yet, it's the kind of joy that lasts, not the smile of a good day, but the peace of a good life. Not excitement, but meaning. Not escape, but engagement. It's when you stop running from who you are and start shaping it, when you stop consuming life and start creating it. Eudaimonia doesn't promise ease, but it promises something far rarer, a life that matters, not just to others, but to you. Pluralistic ignorance. Pluralistic ignorance is a cruel psychological trap, one where everyone is pretending and no one knows it. It happens when people privately reject or question a belief, norm, or behavior, but publicly go along with it because they think everyone else believes it. And the haunting twist? Everyone else is thinking the same thing. It's the silence in a room full of people who all disagree with what's being said, but nod anyway. The laugh at a cruel joke no one finds funny. The student afraid to speak out in a class where everyone feels just as lost. The politician who clings to a toxic policy, thinking it's what the public wants, while the public silently waits for someone to say, this isn't right. Pluralistic ignorance thrives in fear, fear of judgment, of isolation, of being the only one. So we swallow our discomfort, mask our doubts, and perform belief like a ritual. It creates a world where people suffer under standards they don't support, uphold values they don't share, and perpetuate lies they don't believe, all because no one is brave enough or sure enough to break the spell. It's not stupidity, it's not cowardice, it's loneliness, a silent, shared confusion that grows louder the longer it's unspoken. And it means that sometimes the crowd you fear may already agree with you. They're just waiting for you to speak first. Pluralistic ignorance doesn't just trap individuals. It paralyzes entire cultures. And the key to breaking it isn't certainty. It's honesty. The courage to say what you're already thinking and discover you're not alone. Social constructivism. Social constructivism is the unsettling, liberating idea that much of what we take as real, race, gender, class, even money, even sanity, is not etched into the fabric of the universe, but built by us. Not fake, not imaginary, but constructed through centuries of language, institutions, rituals, and power. These aren't things we discover, they're things we create. And once created, they shape our lives like stone. It means $1 has value not because of metal or paper, but because we believe it does. It means being a man or a woman isn't just biology. It's a set of roles, expectations, and identities written into culture and reinforced until they feel natural. It means race isn't a scientific fact, but a story that's been weaponized and passed down through generations until it became law, violence, and fear. Social constructivism doesn't mean these things don't matter. They do. They define people's lives, but it means their power is not inevitable. It was made, and anything made can be unmade. It reveals that what feels eternal may be disturbingly recent, that norms we obey without question were once just someone's decision, someone's design. This idea shakes the ground beneath tradition. It forces you to see how much of your identity was handed to you before you could speak. It's painful, but it's also freeing, because if the world was constructed this way, then we are not prisoners. We are architects, and we can rebuild. The cage was made of stories, and maybe so is the key. Epistemological anarchism. Epistemological anarchism is the intellectual wildfire that burns down the temple of science, not to destroy truth, but to set it free. It says there is no single scientific method, no ultimate authority, no sacred blueprint for how knowledge must be found. Truth, it argues, is not a neat staircase. It's a jungle, and sometimes to discover something truly new, you have to leave the map behind. This idea, championed by philosopher Paul Feyerabend, is a direct rebellion against the rigid dogma that science is orderly, objective, and methodical. He pointed to history and asked, is that really how progress happened? Was Galileo following procedure when he defied the church and conventional wisdom? Were revolutions in physics, biology, or astronomy born from rulebooks or from chaos, intuition, even accident? Epistemological anarchism doesn't deny the power of science. It challenges the myth of its purity. It exposes how scientific institutions, like any other, are shaped by politics, personalities, funding, and fear. It dares to say that sometimes the greatest discoveries are made by breaking the rules, not following them. To the anarchist, knowledge is not a cathedral, it's a carnival, a place where many voices clash, where wild ideas deserve space, where even the most absurd theory might be the spark that changes everything. It's messy, risky, uncomfortable, but that's the point. Epistemological anarchism isn't a call to abandon reason. It's a call to remember that reason itself was once radical, that progress doesn't come from obedience, but from boldness. And sometimes, truth doesn't follow the method. It breaks it. Supervenience. Supervenience is the quiet law beneath complexity, the idea that higher-level properties like beauty, love, pain, or morality depend on the physical, the material, the tiny mechanisms humming beneath the surface, but they aren't just reducible to atoms or neurons or code. They emerge, anchored in matter, yet greater than the sum of it. It says that if two things are physically identical, they must also be identical in all their higher traits. Two identical brains must contain the same thoughts. Two identical actions must carry the same moral weight. But that doesn't mean the higher level traits are those physical ones. Love is not just hormones. Justice is not just social dynamics. Art is not just pigments and pixels. They supervene on those physical details, but they become something more, something new. Supervenience is how the emotional is born from the electric, how the sacred rises from the cellular, how a symphony, coded in vibrations and timing, becomes grief or triumph in your chest. It's the miracle of emergence, not magic, not mystery, but layered reality. But this idea is also a razor, because if our minds, our morals, ourselves supervene on the physical, then change the base, and the soul shifts, damage the brain, and the personality falters. It's humbling. It reminds us how fragile consciousness is, how dependent, how breathtakingly physical. Still, supervenience gives dignity to complexity. It honors the fact that we are biology, but we're not only biology. That out of matter, meaning can arise. that the dust beneath our skin gives birth to the stars in our minds. Infinite ethics. Infinite ethics is a terrifying frontier where moral reasoning breaks under the weight of forever. It confronts what happens when our choices ripple not through centuries, but through eternity, when we imagine not just millions of lives affected by our actions, but infinite ones, futures without end, worlds without number, and suddenly morality doesn't feel like a compass, it feels like a storm. This idea haunts long-termism, effective altruism, and cosmology. What if humanity survives for billions of years? What if we colonize the stars? What if our choices today determine whether trillions of future lives ever exist? The stakes explode beyond comprehension. Every decision becomes a fracture in infinity. But infinity does something awful to ethics. It breaks the math. If lives are unending, how do you compare good and bad outcomes? If one future has infinite happiness and another has infinite suffering, how do you weigh them? Does it even make sense to choose? The numbers stretch until they become meaningless, swallowed in paradox. And yet, infinite ethics forces us to ask, what if your actions matter more than you can fathom? What if one moment of kindness, one policy, one decision in the present might echo across civilizations unborn? Or worse, what if we do harm, unknowingly, on an infinite scale? It paralyzes, it inflames, it whispers, you might be shaping eternity right now, and there may never be a final answer, only the haunting responsibility to act, to care, to think, as if forever we're watching, because maybe it is. Mimetic desire. Mimetic desire is the haunting idea that your deepest wants might not be your own. Philosopher and anthropologist René Girard claimed that desire isn't born in isolation, it's copied. I want what you want. You want what they want. We imitate each other, not just in action, but in longing. And the things we chase, lovers, status, success, beauty, often matter to us because they matter to someone else. It starts in childhood, subtly. A child ignores a toy until another child picks it up. Suddenly, it's precious, but it doesn't stop there. Adults do it too, with careers, partners, brands, beliefs. We look sideways, not inward. We don't desire the object. We desire the recognition, the validation, the imagined completion it seems to give someone else. And this imitation breeds rivalry, because if two people desire the same thing, competition becomes inevitable. Girard said the greatest violence doesn't come from difference, but from similarity. Envy, betrayal, even war can rise not from opposing desires, but shared ones. Mimetic desire pulls us together, then tears us apart. Worse still, we often don't know it's happening. We think our goals are authentic, that our dreams are ours, but what if they were planted subtly, invisibly, by the people we admire, resent, or follow? What if the ladder we're climbing leads to someone else's summit? Mimetic desire doesn't just explain why we want. It explains why we hurt, why we compete, why we spiral into conflict. And until we confront it, we remain chained, not to what we lack, but to what we see others wanting. The open question argument. The open question argument is a quiet blade that slices through every attempt to define morality. It was sharpened by philosopher G.E. Moore, and its edge cuts clean. No matter how you try to define good as pleasure, as desire, as evolution, as God's will, you can always ask, but is that really good? And that question is never closed. It always makes sense to ask, which means your definition failed. Try it. Say, good means what brings happiness. Then ask, but is happiness always good? The question still feels real, still bites. Say, good means what God commands. Then ask, is everything God commands truly good? If the answer isn't automatic, the definition hasn't captured good. It's still open, still alive, still not pinned down. This argument haunts moral philosophy because it exposes something eerie about our deepest values. They resist being boiled down. Good isn't a fact you can dissect. It's not just a word, it's a glowing, irreducible sense, like a moral light we see but can't bottle. And every time we try, the open question cracks the bottle wide open. It makes goodness feel at once more real, as if it points beyond our theories, and more elusive, forever just outside the reach of reason. You can chase it, fight for it, live by it, but you can't fully define it. The open question argument doesn't just challenge language, it dares you to sit with mystery, to admit that some truths aren't built from logic or science, but from something deeper, something that still, after everything, makes you ask, what is good really? Consequentialism. Consequentialism is the ruthless heartbeat of moral clarity, the belief that what matters most is what happens in the end. It doesn't care what your intentions were. It doesn't ask how noble your heart was. It measures morality in outcomes, in impact, in results. An action is good if it brings about good consequences. An action is wrong if it leads to suffering, no matter how pure the motive behind it. At first, it feels simple. Save 5 lives instead of 1. End a war, even if it takes a lie. Sacrifice your comfort to ease another's pain. It speaks to our deep sense of moral arithmetic, that the world can and should be made better by what we do, that every decision is a fork in the road, shaping the lives of others, sometimes forever. But consequentialism is not gentle. It is relentless. It can demand that you lie, steal, even kill, if the outcome saves more lives, eases more suffering, brings more joy. It asks, would you do something terrible for a greater good? And if the answer is no, consequentialism wants to know, why not, if it would help more people? It forces you to confront every comfortable boundary you've built. No act is sacred, no rule is unbreakable. Only the consequences remain, and that's what makes it both noble and terrifying, because it dares you to look beyond your conscience, your culture, your comfort, and ask, what kind of world will this create? And when the dust settles, consequentialism leaves you with just one brutal, beautiful question. Did it help? Deontology. Deontology is the moral voice that stands firm when the world pleads for compromise. It is the belief that right and wrong are not measured by outcomes, but by principle, that morality is rooted in rules, duties, and the unshakable sense that some actions are wrong no matter what they achieve. To the deontologist, a lie is still a lie, even if it saves a life. A betrayal is still a betrayal, even if it brings peace. Immanuel Kant, its fiercest defender, declared that we must act only on maxims we could will as universal laws, that to treat another human as a mere means to an end is to violate their dignity. Deontology doesn't care what the ends are. It cares about the means. It asks you to do the right thing because it is right, not because it's useful, not because it feels good, not because it will work. This kind of ethics demands clarity, integrity, and sometimes sacrifice. It tells you to tell the truth even when it costs you, to keep your promises even when no one's watching, to respect others' autonomy even when it breaks your heart. It offers no escape through results, only the call to stand by what's right. And that's where its strength lies, and its tragedy, because sometimes doing the right thing hurts. Sometimes it means letting 5 die because you refuse to kill 1. Sometimes it means walking away from the easy solution and carrying the weight of principle alone. But for the deontologist, morality is not a game of numbers. It's a matter of character, a line in the soul that should never be crossed, even when the world demands it. Virtue ethics. Virtue ethics is not about rules, it's not about results. It's about who you are when no one's watching. It tells you that morality doesn't live in commandments or calculations. It lives in character, in habits shaped over time, in the quiet daily choices that form the soul. Born from Aristotle and carried through centuries, Virtue ethics whispers that goodness is not a switch to flip, but a muscle to build. You don't become just by memorizing justice. You become just by doing just things over and over until justice lives in your bones. You become courageous not by conquering fear once, but by facing it every time it roars. Morality, in this view, isn't an answer. It's a practice. This is a morality of depth, of becoming, not obeying. You don't ask, what should I do? You ask, what kind of person am I becoming? The honest one, the generous one, the temperate, wise, compassionate one. Not because it's written in some sacred rule book, but because it feels right, because it aligns your outer life with the inner shape of your best self. But virtue ethics is demanding. There are no shortcuts, no ethical cheat codes. You can't hide behind good intentions or better outcomes. You must live it consistently, humbly, and often in silence, and you will fail over and over. But each failure is a chance to refine, not reject, the self you're trying to build. Virtue ethics doesn't offer perfection. It offers integrity, a life that's not just moral in moments, but moral in motion, a life that in the end reflects who you truly chose to be. Panpsychism is the breathtaking, unsettling idea that consciousness is not an accident of evolution or a trick of the brain, but a fundamental feature of the universe itself, that everything, from a human being to a honeybee to a speck of dust, possesses some faint flicker of experience. Not thought, not self-awareness, but something, a glimmer, a feeling, a whisper of being. It's not saying rocks think or atoms dream. It's saying that mind is not something that just shows up at the top of complexity. It's baked into the cosmos at the ground level, that the universe doesn't become conscious. It always was, in some scattered, fragmented way. Consciousness isn't an emergent property. It's a universal one. Panpsychism arises not from mysticism, but from a deep frustration with materialism. If the universe is made only of lifeless, meaningless matter, how did that matter ever give rise to experience? How does gray tissue in your skull produce redness, sadness, longing? Science explains structure, but it cannot touch the what it's like of consciousness. So panpsychism flips the script. Maybe consciousness isn't the last thing to emerge, but the first thing to exist. And that idea changes everything. It turns the universe from a dead machine into something alive, aware, intimate. It means you are not a cosmic fluke. You are a continuation, a concentration of a deeper, older awareness. It doesn't give easy answers, but it asks a question you can feel in your bones. What if you were never truly alone? What if, in some dim, quiet way, the stars have always been watching back? Logical atomism. Logical atomism is the bold, crystalline belief that beneath the chaos of the world lies something clean, precise, and absolute. Atomic facts, tiny, indivisible truths that form the foundation of all reality. Pioneered by Bertrand Russell and Ludwig Wittgenstein in the early 20th century, it imagines a universe not made of matter or emotion, but of logic, arranged like stars in a perfectly ordered sky. In this view, the world is like a giant puzzle, and each piece is a basic fact. This object has this property. This thing stands in this relation to that thing. These facts, simple and pure, combine to form the complex web of existence. Language, when used correctly, can mirror this structure. A true statement is one that aligns with these atomic facts. A false one breaks the pattern. Logical atomism is elegant but merciless. It strips the world of its mystery and mess, leaving behind only what can be said with clarity and certainty. Feelings, too vague. God, undefined. Morality, suspicious. If it can't be broken down into logical parts, it might not even mean anything. It's a philosophy of surgical precision, born from the dream of making thought as clear as math. And in it, there's a strange beauty, the idea that truth isn't abstract or unreachable, but right here in small, solid units. That meaning isn't floating, it's built, block by block, word by word. But it's also lonely, because if all that exists are facts, where does wonder live? Where do longing, grief, and joy fit into a world built from syntax and structure? Or are they just noise, untranslatable, unspeakable, but still burning inside us? Indeterminism. Indeterminism is the quiet rebellion against the cold, clockwork universe. The idea that not everything is caused, not everything is fated, and some events happen without reason, without cause, without why. It's the terrifying, electrifying belief that reality has cracks, gaps where the future isn't written, where outcomes are truly open, not just uncertain because we lack information, but because the world itself is undecided. It defies the old dream of determinism, that if you knew every particle's position and velocity, you could predict the future like solving an equation. Indeterminism says, no, you couldn't. Even with perfect knowledge, some things will still remain wild. A quantum particle doesn't just hide its secrets, it doesn't have them until the moment it acts. Possibility is baked into the bones of the universe. This has deep, unsettling consequences. It means that randomness is real, not just ignorance, but something woven into the fabric of nature. That a mutation sparking life, a decision splitting a timeline, a breath held or released might have no cause at all, just choice, just chance. And yet, this chaos isn't meaningless. Indeterminism is what allows free will to breathe. It's the reason the future isn't a script, but a stage. It's why love can be chosen, why heroes can rise, why history can turn on a whisper, not because it was destined, but because it wasn't. Indeterminism doesn't offer comfort. It offers possibility. It says the universe is unfinished, unpredictable, and so are you. Dialectics. Dialectics is the pulse of transformation, the belief that progress, truth, and growth are not born from certainty, but from conflict. It says the world doesn't move in straight lines. It moves in spirals, through tension and contradiction. One idea rises, the thesis, is challenged by its opposite, the antithesis, and from their clash, a deeper truth emerges, the synthesis. And then the process begins again, endless, restless, alive. From Hegel to Marx, dialectics has shaped how we understand history, consciousness, politics, and selfhood. It tells us that opposites aren't enemies, they're fuel, that we become more by confronting what resists us, that every truth carries its own limit, and only by facing what breaks it can we move forward. Growth, in this view, is never peaceful. It's a battle, not of violence, but of meaning. Dialectics refuses comfort. It doesn't let you settle. It asks, what tension lives in this belief? What voices does it silence? What shadow does it cast? It sees contradiction not as failure, but as a signal. Change is needed here. But it also gives hope, because even in collapse, dialectics sees birth. Every broken system, every failed ideology, every inner crisis contains the seeds of something new. You're not meant to choose one side forever. You're meant to evolve. Dialectics is not about being right. It's about becoming real. And in a world fractured by polarity, it offers a deeper vision, that the fire between opposites doesn't destroy, it refines. That contradiction isn't the end of truth. It's how truth begins again. Dualism. Dualism is the ancient haunting belief that you are not just flesh, that your mind and your body are two fundamentally different substances fused in fragile partnership. The body is matter, the physical vessel. The mind, your thoughts, your feelings, yourself is something else entirely, immaterial, invisible, perhaps eternal. To be human, in the dualist view, is to be a ghost in a machine. It was Descartes who made this view famous with his stark declaration, I think, therefore I am. Not I breathe or I move or I bleed, but I think. Consciousness, not biology, is the anchor of existence. You can doubt the world, your senses, even your own body, but not your awareness. And if the mind can exist without the body, then maybe it does. Dualism feels true in moments of deep reflection or grief. When a loved one dies, we don't say, the body is gone. We say, they are gone, as if what they were cannot be reduced to tissue, as if the soul has slipped through the cracks of matter, leaving something hollow behind. But dualism also creates a problem. How do these two worlds, mind and matter, interact? If the mind isn't physical, how does it move your hand, quicken your pulse, burn your cheeks with shame? And if they're separate, can they ever truly be whole? Still, the power of dualism lingers. It tells you that your pain, your love, your thoughts are not just chemical storms. They are something more. And maybe when the body breaks, something remains, watching, remembering, being. Monism is the quiet cosmic certainty that all is one, that beneath the endless diversity of the world, every object, every thought, every star and scar and heartbeat flows from a single source, one substance, one principle, one reality. The names change, matter, mind, spirit, energy, but the truth remains. The universe is not a collection of separate things. It is one thing appearing many. To the monist, dualities like body and soul, self and other, nature and spirit are illusions, shadows on the wall of a deeper unity. What seems fragmented is only surface level. Your skin may divide you from the world, but your atoms are the world. Your mind may feel private, but it echoes the same patterns that move planets and pulse through galaxies. Separation is a trick of perception. Underneath, there is no other. This idea is ancient. It breathes through Eastern philosophy, Advaita, Vedanta, Taoism, Buddhism. It pulses through Spinoza's God or nature. It whispers through modern physics, where matter dissolves into energy, particles into fields. Monism unites mystic and scientist in a single, trembling question. What if everything is just one thing, knowing itself in infinite forms? But monism isn't just a metaphysical claim. It's an invitation to see yourself not as a solitary spark, but as part of a blazing whole, to let go of the illusion of isolation, to stop asking, where do I end? And start wondering, did I ever begin? It's a worldview that doesn't just change how you think, it changes how you feel. Because if all is one, then you have never truly been alone. Not once, not ever. Materialism is the stark, unflinching claim that reality is only matter, that everything you see, feel, believe, or dream is built from particles and governed by physical laws. No souls, no spirits, no magic behind the curtain, just atoms in motion, just flesh, bone, brain, and chemical fire. It's not cynicism, it's a worldview rooted in awe for the physical universe. To the materialist, consciousness is not a ghost inside your skull, but an emergent property of neurons firing in impossible patterns. Love is not some divine spark. It's oxytocin, memory, dopamine, attachment. The warmth in your chest, the ache of heartbreak, the hunger for meaning, all of it is happening in a body, a brain, a machine made of stardust. Materialism doesn't ask you to believe less. It asks you to believe in what can be touched, measured, seen. It gave rise to science, to medicine, to modern technology. It replaced superstition with reason. It burned away illusion to illuminate what is, but it comes at a cost. Under materialism, death is final. Free will may be a beautiful illusion. Beauty, morality, meaning, these aren't truths floating in the ether. They are human constructs, useful, powerful, but not eternal, not objective, just ours. Still, there is wonder here, because if the universe is only matter, then matter is enough. It means the neurons in your head can write poetry. The carbon in your chest can feel love. The same elements that fuel stars can ask, why am I here? Materialism doesn't steal the soul. It dares to say the soul was made of matter all along, and that's what makes it holy. Idealism. Idealism is the radical, mind-bending belief that reality isn't made of matter, it's made of mind, that the world you see, touch, hear, and live in doesn't exist independently of consciousness, but is shaped by it, perhaps even created by it. At its core, idealism whispers, what's out there is a projection of what's in here. That spirit, thought, awareness is not just part of reality, but the foundation of it. To an idealist, the physical world is not the ultimate ground of being. Your body, the stars, time itself, these may all be phenomena within consciousness, not separate from it. You're not a brain inside a universe. The universe may be inside you or inside some vast, underlying mind that holds all existence together like a dream held by a dreamer. This view stretches across mysticism, philosophy, and even quantum physics. From Plato's forms to Berkeley's, to be is to be perceived, to the strange truth that particles don't settle until observed. Idealism challenges everything we assume is solid. It flips the script. Matter isn't the source. Mind is. It's intoxicating. It turns life into something sacred. A tree is not just wood and chlorophyll. It's an idea pulsing with presence. Death is not extinction. It may be a shift in perception. The world is not cold, dead space. It is alive with meaning because it is born of thought. But idealism also unsettles. If reality is mental, then where is the ground? What anchors truth? Are we dreaming? And if so, who is dreaming us? Idealism doesn't answer. It invites to see the world not as a machine, but as a miracle made of mind. Phenomenology. Phenomenology is philosophy turned inward, an intimate, piercing attempt to understand the world as it is lived, not as it is measured. It is the study of experience itself from the first-person perspective, not how neurons fire or how objects behave, but how it feels to see, to suffer, to choose, to be. It doesn't ask, what is the brain doing? It asks, what is it like to be you right now? Launched by Edmund Husserl and carried by minds like Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, and Sartre, phenomenology begins with a radical shift. Forget what you think you know about the world. Forget science, systems, categories. Start with the raw immediacy of experience. What shows up to your awareness before you analyze it, name it, or doubt it? The color of a sunset, the weight of silence, the way grief makes time feel slower. Phenomenology doesn't deny reality, it reclaims it. It says that before the world becomes data, it is given to you through perception, emotion, and consciousness. That meaning is not something you find, but something you live. That the body is not a vessel, you are your body. That the self is not an object in the world, it is the opening through which the world appears. It's not abstraction, it's intimacy. It's standing in the middle of life and paying attention without filters. It's the courage to say, this is how it feels, and that matters. Phenomenology asks not just what you know, but how you are. And in a world obsessed with the external, it dares to say the deepest truths might lie in the spaces only you can see. Utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is the relentless moral arithmetic of consequence, the belief that the right thing to do is whatever brings the greatest happiness to the greatest number of people. It doesn't ask who you are. It doesn't ask what you believe. It asks only this. Did your actions reduce suffering? Did they spread joy? Everything else, intention, tradition, even justice, bows to that single measure, overall well-being. To the utilitarian, morality isn't found in sacred texts or divine commands. It's calculated, weighed, compared. Lying may be wrong unless it prevents pain. Sacrifice may be tragic unless it saves more lives. There are no absolutes, only consequences. No perfect answers, only the constant demand to do better for more. This philosophy burns with urgency. In a world full of hunger, war, injustice, Utilitarianism doesn't wait for theory, it acts. It asks us to step outside our personal attachments and see the big picture, to care not just about our circle, but about everyone. A stranger's pain matters. A far-off child's joy counts just as much as your own. But this clarity comes with a cost. What about the one innocent person punished to save many? What about dignity, rights, fairness, when they clash with the numbers? Utilitarianism asks you to be strong enough to make hard choices, but sometimes it feels inhuman. Still, its question remains, piercing and impossible to ignore. If you could ease more pain, bring more light, help more people, why wouldn't you? It's not just a moral theory, it's a challenge, one that demands courage, compassion, and a willingness to carry the weight of every life your choices touch. Existentialism. Existentialism is a scream in the dark, a philosophy born from the raw terror and beauty of being alive. It tells you that life has no preset meaning, no divine script, no cosmic purpose waiting to be found. You were thrown into this world, unasked and unprepared, and now it is your burden and your power to decide what it means. There are no instructions, no guarantees. You are free, and that freedom is both a gift and a curse, because with it comes the crushing weight of responsibility. You can't blame fate. You can't hide behind God or society or genetics. Your life is your own, and every choice you make, every action you take, defines you. You don't discover who you are. You create who you are, moment by moment, choice by choice. Sartre called this anguish, that dizzying sense that your freedom is limitless, and no one else can live your life for you. Kierkegaard called it dread, the feeling that in every moment you stand at the edge of a cliff, free to leap into meaning or sink into despair. Camus called it absurd, the haunting contradiction between your desperate hunger for purpose and a silent, indifferent universe. But existentialism doesn't end in nihilism. It rises into authenticity, the fierce demand that you live truthfully, act deliberately, and refuse to become a puppet of expectations or fear. It says, stop waiting for someone to save you. Stop pretending the meaning is out there. The meaning is you, in your pain, in your passion, in your choices. You are free, and that is terrifying. But it is also the most human thing there is. Absurdism. Absurdism is the quiet scream at the heart of being human, the realization that life offers no ultimate meaning, and yet we ache for it anyway. It's the philosophy of the broken bridge between our deepest longing and a silent, indifferent universe. We cry out for purpose, for justice, for clarity, and the universe answers with nothing, no blueprint, no reason, just stars burning in the void. Albert Camus, absurdism's most haunting voice, said it plainly. The absurd is born from the collision between our thirst for meaning and the world's refusal to give it. You live, you work, you love, you suffer, and one day you die. No cosmic plan, no grand reward, just the absurd, the unbearable tension between a heart that needs meaning and a world that gives none. So what do? Some deny it, clinging to religion, ideology, or distraction. Others despair, choosing nihilism or even death. But Camus offered a third path, rebellion. He said the only way to face the absurd is to embrace it, to live fully, joyfully, even defiantly, not because life has meaning, but because it doesn't. Absurdism doesn't want your belief. It wants your honesty. It doesn't promise peace, but it offers freedom, the freedom to stop searching for some divine answer and start creating your own, to write your meaning in a meaningless world, knowing it may vanish but doing it anyway. You are a flame dancing in the dark. You are the question with no answer, and still, somehow, you burn. Nihilism is the cold, hollow silence after all the gods have fallen. It's the terrifying conviction that there is no meaning, no truth, no higher purpose guiding the chaos, that morality is a myth, divinity a dream, and everything we hold sacred is built on sand. It doesn't whisper, it hollows, it tells you nothing matters. Religious truths, inventions, moral principles, social fictions, your life, your suffering, your hope, fleeting sparks in a void that never asked for you, never noticed you, and won't remember you. Nihilism strips away the comfort we cling to and leaves behind a brutal honesty. There is no deeper why. It emerges when the scaffolding of belief collapses, after war, after loss, after staring too long into the abyss of modernity. Nietzsche saw it coming, the death of God not as a victory, but as a wound. When the old foundations crumble, what's left? And who are you when nothing above tells you what to do, who to be, what to love? Some crumble under it, others numb themselves. But nihilism is not just destruction, it's a threshold. Because once everything is meaningless, you are free, free to create, to choose, to build your own fire in the darkness. But it will never be easy. There's no applause, no cosmic reward, just the echo of your own will. Nihilism doesn't offer comfort. It offers the raw, unfiltered truth. If nothing matters by default, then it's up to you to matter anyway, or not. The void doesn't care. That's the horror. That's the power. Structuralism. Structuralism is the quiet dismantling of everything we thought was solid. It's the idea that meaning doesn't come from the thing itself, but from its place in a structure, in a system of differences, in the web of signs we live inside. Nothing means anything on its own. A word, a gesture, even an identity. These don't point inward to some deep essence. They point outward, to context, to contrast, to what they are not. Born in linguistics through Ferdinand de Saussure and expanded into anthropology, literature, philosophy, and psychology, structuralism says, meaning is not built into the world, it's constructed through relations. The word mother means what it does not because of something eternal inside it, but because it stands in opposition to father, child, stranger. Everything means something because of how it fits, not what it is. This changes everything. Myths, languages, even cultures aren't just collections of symbols, they're systems, patterns, structures that shape how we think, feel, and live. Claude Lévi-Strauss saw the same deep structures in tribal stories as in modern minds. Roland Barthes read fashion, food, and media as texts built from signs, not truths. Everything around you is language, and language is a code. Structuralism doesn't kill meaning. It exposes its fragility. It reveals that we are not solitary islands of essence, but nodes in a vast net of signs. And once you see that, you begin to realize you are not just who you are who you are in relation to everything else. The question isn't what something means, it's where it stands. And in that structure, we are all defined by difference. Relativism. Relativism is the unsettling mirror that reflects 1,000 truths, all staring back at you, none of them absolute. It's the belief that morality, meaning, and even truth itself are not fixed, universal laws etched into the cosmos, but shifting creations, born of culture, context, and personal perspective. What's right for one society may be wrong for another. What's sacred to you may be nonsense to someone else. And in relativism, both can be true. It doesn't say anything goes. It says everything depends. Morality is not a single moral code written in stone. It's a chorus of stories told by different people in different places, shaped by time, tradition, trauma, survival. One culture sees loyalty as the highest virtue. Another sees individual freedom. One mourns a death in silence. Another celebrates it with song. Who's right? Relativism answers, they both are, in their world. This idea cuts deep because it means your values, your beliefs, your truths, no matter how passionately you hold them, aren't universal. They're not divine. They're not immune. they're human, and that realization can shake your certainty to its core, but it can also soften you. Relativism humbles. It teaches you to listen before judging, to understand before condemning. It doesn't demand that you surrender your convictions, but that you hold them with the knowledge that others hold theirs just as tightly. It asks, what if the world isn't meant to agree? Relativism doesn't promise peace. It offers complexity, and within that complexity, maybe, just maybe, a deeper kind of respect can grow. Skepticism. Skepticism is the relentless voice in your head that whispers, but how do you really know? It's the ancient doubt that gnaws at every certainty, the refusal to take truth at face value, the philosophical fire that burns through illusion, dogma, and blind belief. Skepticism doesn't deny truth, it demands proof, and even when proof is offered, it asks again. It began with the Greeks, who questioned the trustworthiness of the senses. How can we be sure this world isn't a dream, that memory isn't a trick, that reason itself isn't flawed? Descartes took it further, stripping away every assumption until all that remained was the lonely thought. I think, therefore I am. Everything else was up for debate. Skepticism isn't cynicism, it's clarity with sharp edges. It asks, is this knowledge or just belief dressed in confidence? It challenges religion, science, politics, even morality, not out of malice, but out of an unwillingness to be deceived. It's the ghost in the system that won't let the machine run unquestioned. But skepticism comes with a cost. When doubt becomes a way of life, certainty starts to rot, trust decays, meaning fades. The skeptic stares into the mirror and wonders if even they are real. And at its most extreme, skepticism collapses into paralysis, a refusal to commit to anything because everything might be wrong. Still, in a world overflowing with false prophets, fake news, and polished lies, skepticism is not just a defense, it's a lifeline. It dares you to think, to question, to dig deeper, but it also asks, when you've questioned everything, what will you believe in anyway?